Hello friends. Did you know that nearly 80% of those who watch my videos aren't subscribed? If you enjoy the content, I'd truly appreciate it if you hit that subscribe button. It helps a lot. Also, don't forget to leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments. Your interaction not only supports the channel's growth, but also helps these stories reach more people. Thank you all for being here. By the way, where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments. I've been wearing this badge for 17 years. 17 years of West Texas nights, empty highways, and a silence that makes you think too much about things you'd rather forget. My name is Cole Briggs, and I work the night shift at the Presidio County Sheriff's Department on the Texas-Mexico border. Most people don't understand the situation here. The border isn't just a line on a map, it's hundreds of miles of desert, mountains, and darkness so thick you could cut it with a knife. During the day, you can see the heat waves rising off the asphalt. At night, a completely different world emerges. A world where things that don't make sense during the day happen. The night this all started was August 14th, 2021. I remember because it was 2 days before my daughter's birthday, and I was supposed to pick up her present during my meal break. Never got the chance. I was running patrol along Highway 67, about 15 miles south of Marfa. It's a lonely stretch of road that cuts through some of the most desolate country you'll ever see. Jagged mountains in the distance, scrub brush, and the occasional abandoned building that used to be something before the desert reclaimed it. The radio had been quiet for most of the shift. Unusual for a Saturday night, but I wasn't complaining. Then, at 11:47 p.m., dispatch broke the silence. Unit 23, we have a reported disturbance at mile marker 83. Caller states they can hear someone calling for help. I grabbed the mic. Copy that, dispatch. What's the location of the caller? There was a pause. I could hear Sarah, our dispatcher, typing on her keyboard. Caller disconnected before providing details. Number came back to a burner phone, no Jeep's data. That was the first thing that felt wrong. People don't usually call 911 from burner phones unless they've got something to hide. And mile marker 83 was in the middle of nowhere. No houses, no businesses, nothing but desert for miles in every direction. 10-4, dispatch. I'm about 8 minutes out. Any description of the disturbance? Negative. Caller just said they could hear someone screaming for help, then the line went dead. I flipped on my light bar and accelerated. 8 minutes on these roads feels like forever when someone might be in trouble. The highway stretched out ahead of me, my headlights cutting through the darkness like a knife. On either side, the desert was alive with shadows that moved in ways that made you wonder if your eyes were playing tricks on you. As I approached mile marker 83, I slowed down and scanned both sides of the highway. Nothing. No vehicles, no people, no signs of any disturbance. Just the empty road and the vast darkness beyond. I pulled onto the shoulder and killed the engine. The silence that followed was absolute. Out here, you don't hear traffic or distant sirens or any of the sounds that remind you civilization exists. Just wind, the occasional coyote, and your own breathing. I stepped out of the cruiser and stood there listening. The night air was still warm from the day's heat, probably in the high 80s. My hand rested on my service weapon as I surveyed the area with my flashlight. That's when I heard it. A voice, faint and distant, calling out from somewhere in the desert. Help! Please! Someone! The voice was coming from the east, maybe a quarter mile off the highway. I grabbed my radio. Dispatch, Unit 23. I've got a possible victim calling for help, approximately 400 yards east of mile marker 83. I'm going to investigate on foot. Copy that, Unit 23. Do you need backup? I hesitated. The nearest deputy was at least 25 minutes away. If someone was hurt out there, they might not have that kind of time. Negative for now. I'll advise if the situation changes. I took my heavy-duty flashlight and started walking into the desert. The terrain was rough. Loose rocks, patches of prickly pear cactus, and small arroyos that could twist your ankle if you weren't careful. The voice kept calling out, always sounding like it was just ahead, just beyond the reach of my flashlight. After about 10 minutes of walking, I stopped and listened again. The voice had stopped. I called out, "Sheriff's Department, where are you?" Nothing. I swept my flashlight across the landscape. In the beam, I could see the outline of an old dirt road, barely visible beneath years of desert growth. It wasn't on any map I'd ever seen, and I'd patrolled this area for years. The road looked like it hadn't been used in decades, but as I walked closer, I noticed something that made my skin crawl. Fresh tire tracks. 2 sets, running parallel, heading deeper into the desert. I followed the tracks for another few minutes until I came to a clearing. In the center of the clearing was a vehicle, a white pickup truck with its doors standing open and the engine still running. The headlights were on, illuminating a scene that didn't make any sense. There was a campsite set up. A tent, a small fire pit with warm ashes, camping chairs arranged in a circle. But no people. And the thing that really got to me, there were 5 phones lying on the ground, all of them turned on. All of them showing the same thing, a call to 911, active and ongoing. I picked up one of the phones. I could hear dispatch on the other end asking if anyone was there. "Dispatch, this is Unit 23. I've located 5 cell phones at the scene, all with active 911 calls, but there's no one here." "Say again, Unit 23? "The phones are here, but the people aren't. It looks like a campsite, but it's been abandoned. Vehicle is still running, warm ashes in the fire pit. Something's wrong here." I heard the concern in Sarah's voice. "Unit 23, I'm sending backup to your location. Do not proceed further without..." The radio cut out. Not just static, but complete silence. I looked at the display. No signal. That shouldn't have been possible. I was on a county frequency that had coverage across the entire region. I tried my cell phone. No signal there either. That's when I noticed something else. My watch had stopped. The second hand was frozen at 11:58 p.m. I tapped it, thinking the battery had died, but when I held it to my ear, I could hear it ticking. The mechanism was working, but the hands weren't moving. A sound behind me made me spin around, my hand going to my weapon. In the darkness beyond my flashlight's beam, I could see shapes moving. Human shapes, but something about the way they moved wasn't right. Too fluid, too synchronized, like they were all connected by invisible strings. "Sheriff's Department," I called out. "Show yourselves. Keep your hands where I can see them." The shapes stopped moving. For a moment, everything was perfectly still. Then, from the darkness came a voice. My voice. "Dispatch, this is Unit 23. I've located 5 cell phones at the scene, all with active 911 calls, but there's no one here." It was my exact words, my exact tone, played back to me from somewhere in the dark. I felt ice in my veins. "Who's out there?" I shouted. "This is your last warning." The shapes started moving again, circling around me, staying just beyond the reach of my flashlight. And then I heard another voice. Sarah's voice from the dispatch, but it was coming from the darkness, not my radio. "Unit 23, I'm sending backup to your location. Do not proceed further without..." The words cut off exactly where they had before. And then silence. I backed toward the pickup truck, keeping my flashlight moving, trying to track all the shapes at once. There were more of them now, at least a dozen, all moving in that same unsettling way. My foot hit something on the ground. I looked down and saw a piece of paper, weighted down with a rock. In the beam of my flashlight, I could see handwriting. My handwriting. I picked it up with shaking hands and read the words I'd apparently written but had no memory of writing. "Deputy Briggs, you're not supposed to be here yet. Go back to your vehicle. Forget what you've seen. This is not your jurisdiction." Not my jurisdiction. I was a county sheriff's deputy. Everything in Presidio County was my jurisdiction. I looked up from the note. The shapes had stopped moving. They were all standing, perfectly still now, arranged in a circle around me. And I realized with growing horror that they weren't casting shadows. The beam of my flashlight was passing right through them, illuminating the ground beyond. I started backing away, faster now, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. The shapes didn't follow, but I could feel their attention on me, could feel them watching as I retreated. When I finally made it back to the highway, my patrol car was where I'd left it. I got inside, locked the doors, and tried the radio again. This time, it worked. "Dispatch, Unit 23. Unit 23, what's your status? We lost contact with you for approximately 3 minutes. 3 minutes? I'd been out in that desert for at least half an hour. I looked at my watch, 11:58 p.m., the same time it had stopped. But according to dispatch, I'd only been gone 3 minutes. I'm back at my vehicle. The scene is... There's no one here, dispatch. False alarm. Copy that, Unit 23. Do you need that backup? Every instinct I had was screaming at me to say yes, to get someone else out here to confirm I wasn't losing my mind. But something stopped me. The memory of that note in my own handwriting. The shapes that didn't cast shadows. Negative, dispatch, I'm 10 to 8. I sat there for a long time after that, engine running, watching the darkness where I'd walked into the desert. Nothing moved, nothing made a sound, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that something out there was waiting to see what I would do next. Finally, I put the car in drive and pulled back onto the highway. In my rearview mirror, I could see lights in the distance, right where that clearing had been. Not flashlights or vehicle headlights, but something else, something that pulsed and flickered like it was alive. I drove away and didn't look back. I didn't write up a report about what happened at mile marker 83. How could I? What would I say? That I'd found a campsite with no campers, heard my own voice played back to me from the darkness, and received a note in my own handwriting that I didn't remember writing? They'd have me in a psyche eval before lunch. Instead, I went home, poured myself 3 fingers of bourbon, and sat in my living room until the sun came up. I kept telling myself it was stress, exhaustion, maybe dehydration. The mind plays tricks on you out in the desert at night. Every cop knows that. But I couldn't explain the tire tracks. Couldn't explain the phones, all showing active 911 calls. Couldn't explain how 30 minutes had passed for me, while dispatch insisted it had only been 3. I called in sick the next day. First time in 7 years. Spent the day trying to distract myself with normal things. Grocery shopping, lawn work, returning my daughter's birthday gift because I'd missed her party. But my mind kept going back to that clearing, those shapes that didn't cast shadows, my own voice echoing back to me from the darkness. That night, I couldn't sleep. Around 2 a.m., I gave up trying and went to my home office. I logged into the department's case management system and started searching. I didn't know exactly what I was looking for, but I figured there had to be other reports of strange calls around mile marker 83. What I found made my blood run cold. Over the past 18 months, there had been 17 calls to 911 from that same area. 17 reports of people hearing cries for help, seeing mysterious lights, or finding abandoned vehicles. Each time, a deputy had responded. Each time, they'd found nothing. But here's what made it worse. The responding deputy was always the same one. Me. I stared at the screen, reading through reports I had no memory of writing. According to the logs, I'd been to mile marker 83 17 times in the last year and a half. Each report was brief, almost identical. Responded to call of disturbance. No evidence of criminal activity. Area clear. But I only remembered one visit, the one from last night. I pulled up my duty logs for the past 18 months. Sure enough, each time I'd supposedly responded to mile marker 83, there was a gap in my log entries. Sometimes 15 minutes, sometimes half an hour. Time I couldn't account for. My hands were shaking as I reached for my phone. I needed to talk to someone about this. But who? Who do you call when you're a cop and you think you're losing your mind? That's when my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Hello? Static, then a voice. My voice. Deputy Briggs, you're looking in the wrong place. I dropped the phone. It clattered onto my desk, still connected. I could hear breathing on the other end, my own breathing somehow coming through the speaker. Who is this? I demanded. You know who this is. You've always known. This isn't funny. I'll trace this call. You can't trace what doesn't exist. Just like you can't explain what happened at mile marker 83. Just like you can't explain the 17 visits you don't remember. I grabbed the phone. What do you want? I want you to stop looking. Stop trying to make sense of it. Some things aren't meant to be understood, Deputy Briggs. Some things exist in the spaces between the seconds on your watch. In the miles that aren't on any map. In the calls that come from phones that shouldn't work. That's not, your watch stopped at 11:58 p.m. last night. But if you check the logs, dispatch has you back in your vehicle at 11:58 p.m., same minute. How is that possible, Deputy? How can you be in two places at the same time? I couldn't answer. The question hung in the air like smoke. Go back to mile marker 83, the voice continued. But this time, don't look for the clearing. Look for what's beyond it. Look for the road that doesn't exist. The line went dead. I sat there for a long time, staring at my phone. Every rational part of my brain was telling me this was some kind of elaborate prank, that someone was messing with me. But I'd heard my own voice on that call, and I knew that it wasn't a recording. It was somehow me, talking to myself from somewhere else. The next night, I went back to work. I tried to act normal, took my regular patrol route, responded to a few routine calls. But I kept finding myself driving past mile marker 83, slowing down, looking for any sign of that dirt road I'd followed into the desert. Around 10 p.m., dispatch called me. Unit 23, we've got another report near mile marker 83. Caller says they can see lights moving in the desert, approximately half a mile east of the highway. My heart started pounding. Copy that, dispatch. What's the caller's information? Same as before. Burner phone, disconnected before we could get details. I pulled onto the shoulder near mile marker 83 and sat there with my engine running, trying to decide what to do. Part of me wanted to call in sick, to refuse the call, to never come back to this stretch of highway again. But I was a cop. This was my job. And something was happening out here that I needed to understand. I grabbed my flashlight and started walking into the desert, following the same path I'd taken before. This time, I was ready. I had my phone recording video, my body camera activated, a spare radio clipped to my belt in case the first one cut out again. The old dirt road was exactly where I remembered it. Tire tracks still visible in the sand. I followed it to the clearing, expecting to find the white pickup truck and the abandoned campsite. But it was all gone. No truck, no tent, no phones lying on the ground. The clearing was completely empty except for a single object in the center, a mile marker sign. Not one from the highway, but an old wooden post with hand-carved numbers. Mile marker 0. I walked over to it, my flashlight beam shaking in my hand. The wood was weathered and old, but the carving was clear. 0. The mile marker that shouldn't exist. Beyond the sign, I could see what looked like another road. Not a dirt track this time, but an actual paved road. 2 lanes, with faded yellow lines down the center. A road that definitely wasn't on any map, because according to every map I'd ever seen, there was nothing out here but open desert for miles. I stepped onto the pavement. It felt solid under my boots, real. I started walking, following the road as it curved around a small hill. And that's when I saw the lights. They were coming from a building about 100 yards ahead, a small structure that looked like an old border patrol station. But it couldn't be. The nearest checkpoint was 15 miles south, and I knew the location of every official installation in my jurisdiction. As I got closer, I could see vehicles parked outside. Police cruisers, but not from any department I recognized. The paint scheme was wrong. The light bars were an older model, and the unit numbers didn't match any agency I knew. There were people moving around inside the building. I could see them through the windows, officers in uniform, sitting at desks, talking on phones, doing paperwork. A normal night shift at a rural station. I walked up to the front door. There was a plaque mounted beside it. Presidio County Sheriff's Department, Border Station 7, established 1947. Border Station 7 didn't exist. Had never existed. I'd been with the department for 17 years, and I'd never heard of a Station 7. I tried the door. It was unlocked. The inside of the building was like stepping back in time. Old metal desks, rotary phones, filing cabinets that probably hadn't been manufactured since the 1970s. And the officers, they were all wearing uniforms that were decades out of date. The style, the badges, even the weapons they carried were from a different era. None of them looked up when I walked in. They just kept working, typing on manual typewriters, filling out reports by hand, talking on those old phones, like I wasn't even there. "Excuse me," I said. "I'm Deputy Briggs, Presidio County. Can someone tell me what's going on here?" No response. Not even a glance in my direction. I walked over to the nearest desk. The officer sitting there was maybe in his 50s, gray hair, weathered face. He was writing a report, and I could see the date at the top of the page. August 14th, 1987. 34 years ago. Exactly 34 years before the night I first responded to mile marker 83. I reached out to touch the officer's shoulder, and my hand passed right through him. Through him, through the desk, through everything. I pulled my hand back, staring at it in horror. That's when one of the officers finally looked up. A younger man, maybe in his 30s, sitting at a desk by the window. He was looking right at me, and there was recognition in his eyes. He stood up and walked over. As he got closer, I could see his nameplate. Deputy C. Briggs. My nameplate. My name. But this man wasn't me. He was older, more worn down, with scars I didn't have and eyes that had seen things I couldn't imagine. "You came back," he said. His voice was rough, tired. "I knew you would. They always do." "Who are you?" I managed to ask. "I'm you, Deputy Briggs, 34 years from now. Or 34 years ago, depending on how you look at it. Time doesn't work right here. Nothing works right here. This isn't possible. Neither is hearing your own voice in the darkness. Neither is losing 30 minutes that dispatch insists was only 3. Neither is any of this, but here we are." I looked around the station. The other officers were still working, still ignoring us. What is this place? This is where we end up. All of us who got too close to mile marker 83. All of us who followed the voices into the desert and found the road that doesn't exist. He gestured to the other officers. Some of them have been here since the 1950s. Some since last month. Time doesn't mean anything here. But I'm still out there. I'm still working my shift. Are you? How do you know? Maybe you're out there walking through the desert, and this is the real you. Or maybe you're in both places at once. Maybe that's what mile marker 83 does. It splits you, puts one version of you on patrol and traps another version here. I thought about the reports I'd written. The ones I didn't remember. The 17 visits to this area, all documented, but all blank in my memory. Had I been here all those times? Had some version of me been trapped in this station while another version kept working, kept living, completely unaware? How do I get out? I asked. The other me smiled, but there was no humor in it. You don't. None of us do. We're all stuck here working a shift that never ends, in a station that shouldn't exist, on a road that's not on any map. We're the ones who got too close to the edge of something we weren't supposed to see. No, I shook my head. There has to be a way. There's always a way. Then you're smarter than the rest of us. We've been trying to find the exit for decades. Some of us longer. But every time we think we've figured it out, we end up right back here. Writing reports that no one will read. Taking calls that never really happened. Patrolling a border that doesn't exist. I looked at the windows. Outside, I could see the desert, lit by lights from the station. But it wasn't the same desert I'd walked through. The landscape was different, wrong somehow. Mountains that shouldn't be there. Roads that curved in impossible directions. A sky that was too dark and full of stars that didn't match any constellation I knew. You need to leave, the other me said suddenly. You're not fully here yet. Not like we are. You still have a chance to go back, to forget, to stay on the other side of mile marker 0. What if I don't want to forget? Then you'll end up like us, trapped between the seconds on your watch, caught in the spaces between the miles on your map. Is that what you want? To spend eternity answering calls that never end, chasing voices in the darkness that you'll never catch? I looked around the station one more time. All these officers, all these versions of lawmen who'd gotten too close to something they couldn't understand. Some of them had probably been good cops, dedicated, doing their jobs. And this was where they'd ended up. How do I make sure I don't come back? I asked. You stop looking, stop asking questions. The next time you drive past mile marker 83 and you hear voices, or see lights, or get a call about a disturbance, you keep driving. You tell dispatch it was a false alarm. You forget you ever found this road. That's not who I am. I don't ignore calls. Then you're one of us now. Just a matter of time before you can't leave anymore. Behind me, I heard a sound. I turned and saw the door to the station slowly closing, even though no one was touching it. Outside, the desert was getting darker, the stars multiplying until the sky was completely white with them. You need to go, the other me said urgently. Now, before the door closes completely, before you become permanent. I ran for the door. It was almost shut. Just a few inches of gap remaining. I threw myself through it, hitting the ground outside and rolling across the pavement. When I looked back, the building was gone. The road was gone. I was lying in the empty desert, surrounded by nothing but sand and scrub brush, with my flashlight lying a few feet away, still turned on. I grabbed the light and stood up, looking around frantically. No station, no road, no mile marker 0. Just the desert, exactly as it should be. I checked my watch, 11:58 p.m., still, and in the distance I could hear my radio crackling. Unit 23, what's your status? We've lost contact. I didn't respond to dispatch right away. I stood there in the desert, trying to process what I'd just experienced. The station that shouldn't exist. The road that wasn't on any map. The other me, trapped there for what he claimed was decades, working a shift that never ended. Every instinct I had as a cop told me to report this, to get someone else out here to verify what I'd found. But I also knew how that conversation would go. I'd sound insane. They'd put me on administrative leave, order a psych eval, maybe force me into early retirement. And then what? The voices would still be calling from mile marker 83. The road would still be there, and maybe, eventually, I'd find myself permanently trapped in that station with all the others. My radio crackled again. Unit 23, please respond. I keyed the mic. Unit 23, I'm 10-8. False alarm at mile marker 83. No evidence of disturbance. Copy that, Unit 23. Everything okay? Yeah, I lied. Everything's fine. I walked back to my patrol car and sat inside with the doors locked, engine running. My hands were shaking. I looked at my watch. It was working again, showing 12:14 a.m. Somehow, 16 minutes had passed since I'd stepped through that door and landed back in the real desert. 16 minutes, not 3, not 30. 16. Time was inconsistent around mile marker 83, flowing at different speeds depending on where you were. In the station, it didn't flow at all. On the highway, it moved normally. But somewhere in between, in that space where the road appeared and disappeared, time did whatever it wanted. I drove back to town and finished my shift, going through the motions of patrol without really thinking about what I was doing. Every time I passed mile marker 83 for the rest of the night, I kept my eyes straight ahead, didn't slow down, didn't look for lights in the desert, but I could feel it there. That pull, that sense that something was calling to me from beyond the mile markers we used to measure distance and time. It was like a whisper at the edge of hearing, a presence just outside my peripheral vision. Over the next week, I tried to go back to normal, showed up for my shifts, ran my patrol routes, responded to calls, but I couldn't stop thinking about that station, about the other me trapped there, about all those officers who'd made the same mistake I almost made. I started researching. Late at night, after my shifts ended, I'd sit in my home office and dig through old department records, newspaper archives, anything I could find about strange occurrences around mile marker 83. What I found disturbed me more than anything I'd experienced in that desert. Going back to the 1940s, there were reports. Lots of them. Motorists who'd broken down near mile marker 83 and were never seen again. Police officers who'd responded to calls in that area and either disappeared or came back different. Changed somehow. There were even a few documented cases of officers who'd filed reports about finding a border patrol station that shouldn't exist. Those officers didn't last long with the department. Some resigned, some were forced out. A few ended up in psychiatric facilities. And then I found something that made everything click into place. A newspaper article from 1947, buried in the archives of the Marfa Sentinel. The headline read, Border Patrol Station 7, Lost in Desert Storm. According to the article, Border Station 7 had been a remote checkpoint established in 1945, about 15 miles east of Highway 67. In July of 1947, a massive dust storm had hit the region, one of the worst on record. When the storm cleared, Station 7 was gone. Not destroyed, gone. The building, the vehicles, even the access road had vanished. Search parties were sent out, but they found nothing. No debris, no bodies, no evidence that the station had ever existed. 6 officers had been working at Station 7 when it disappeared. All of them were declared dead, but there was a note at the end of the article that caught my attention. Several search party members reported hearing radio transmissions from the missing officers for weeks after the station disappeared. Investigators attributed these reports to atmospheric interference and grief-induced hallucinations. I sat back in my chair, my mind racing. The station I'd found wasn't a hallucination or a parallel dimension or whatever else I'd been imagining. It was Station 7, still there, still functioning, still staffed by officers who thought they were working a normal shift. But they weren't in our world anymore. They were somewhere else. Somewhere that time didn't work right. Somewhere that only appeared when conditions were just perfect. And for some reason, that somewhere had a connection to mile marker 83. The next night, I went back. I know I shouldn't have. The other me had warned me to stay away, to forget what I'd seen. But I couldn't. I needed to understand. I needed to know if there was a way to help those officers, to bring them back, to close whatever door had opened in that desert in 1947. This time, I came prepared. I had extra batteries for my flashlight, multiple radios, my cell phone fully charged, a GPS unit, even a compass. I documented everything, took photos of the mile markers, recorded video of the drive, made detailed notes about exactly where I was and what time it was. I parked at mile marker 83 at 11 p.m. I figured if things went wrong at 11:58, if that was somehow the critical moment, I'd have almost an hour to get out. The walk into the desert was easier this time. I knew where I was going. Within 20 minutes, I found mile marker 0 and the road that led to Station 7. The building looked exactly the same as before. Lights on, vehicles parked outside, officers visible through the windows. But this time, I didn't go inside. Instead, I walked around the perimeter looking for any clue about how this place existed, any weakness in whatever force was keeping it here. That's when I noticed something strange. The building wasn't casting a shadow. The lights from inside should have created shadows outside, especially from the vehicles and equipment, but there were none. It was like the station existed in its own pocket of light, separate from the darkness around it. I pulled out my phone and tried to take a photo. The camera wouldn't focus. Every picture came out blurred, distorted, like the station was vibrating at a frequency my phone couldn't capture. You came back. I spun around. The other me was standing behind me. But he looked different, more transparent, more like a ghost than a person. And he looked tired in a way that went beyond physical exhaustion. I had to, I said. I need to understand what's happening here. Need to know if there's a way to help you. Help us? He laughed, but there was no humor in it. We're beyond help, Deputy. We're not really here anymore. We're echoes. Recordings of officers who used to exist, playing on repeat for eternity. That's not true. You're talking to me right now. You're aware. You're real. Am I? Or are you just hearing what you need to hear? Maybe I'm nothing more than your own mind trying to make sense of something that can't be understood. I stepped closer to him. If you're not real, how did you know I'd come back? How did you warn me before? He was quiet for a moment. Because I remember doing the same thing. Remember standing where you're standing, talking to an older version of myself, asking the same questions. This is the pattern, Deputy Briggs. This is how it works. You find the station, you talk to yourself, you try to understand, and eventually you become part of it. No, I shook my head. I'm not going to accept that. There has to be a way to break the pattern, to close this place down and free everyone trapped here. Then you're going to need to understand what mile marker 83 really is. He gestured to the desert around us. This isn't a place, deputy. It's a threshold. A point where our world and something else overlap. In 1947, when that dust storm hit Station 7, it pushed the building across that threshold, trapped it in between, and ever since then this spot has been thin, weak, a place where the boundary can be crossed if conditions are right. What kind of conditions? Time, always time. It happens at 11:58 p.m., because that's when the storm hit Station 7. That's when the building crossed over. And for 2 minutes, from 11:58 to midnight, this place becomes accessible. You can find the road, you can enter the station. But if you're still here when midnight hits, you're trapped. Forever. Working a shift that never ends. Taking calls from a world you can no longer reach. We're all stuck at 11:58, deputy. All of us. That's our eternity. I looked at my watch. 11:43 p.m. 15 minutes until the critical moment. 15 minutes to figure out if there was any way to change this. What if someone was here at 11:58 but didn't enter the station? I asked. What if they stayed outside, on the road? Then they'd see the truth, see what really happened to Station 7, see how it crossed over. And could they stop it? Could they reverse it? He looked at me for a long moment. No one's ever tried. Everyone who comes here either enters the station or runs away. You'd be the first to just watch. I made a decision then. Maybe it was stupid. Maybe it was the kind of choice that gets people killed or trapped in places that shouldn't exist. But I was tired of running from answers. Tired of living with questions that kept me awake at night. I'm going to stay, I said. I'm going to watch what happens at 11:58. And if there's any chance at all of closing this place down, I'm going to take it. The other me smiled. For the first time since I'd met him, he looked almost hopeful. Then good luck, deputy. Maybe you'll be smarter than the rest of us. Maybe you'll find what we couldn't. He turned and walked back toward the station. As he reached the door, he paused and looked back at me. One more thing. If you do manage to close this place down, if you somehow break the pattern, we'll finally be able to rest. All of us. We'll finally get to end our shift. Then he went inside, and I was alone on that impossible road, waiting for 11:58 p.m. I stood on that road that shouldn't exist and watched my watch tick toward 11:58. Every second felt like an hour. My hand kept drifting toward my radio, toward my phone, reaching for that familiar comfort of knowing I could call for help if I needed it. But I didn't. Some part of me understood that this was something I had to face alone. At 11:55, the air started to change. It got colder, heavier, like the atmosphere itself was holding its breath. The lights in Station 7 began to flicker. Through the windows, I could see the officers inside moving slower, their actions becoming jerky and repetitive, like a video skipping frames. 11:56. The stars overhead started to shift, not moving across the sky the way stars normally do, but rearranging themselves into patterns I'd never seen before. The desert around me began to blur at the edges, like reality itself was losing focus. 11:57. I heard the wind, not the normal desert wind, but something massive, something that sounded like it was coming from every direction at once. The dust storm from 1947, still happening, still raging, caught in an eternal loop just like the officers in the station. And then 11:58 hit. The world split open. I don't have better words for it. The desert, the station, the road, everything fractured like a broken mirror. And I could see through the cracks. I could see 1947. See the original Station 7 in the moment the dust storm hit. I could see the officers running inside, trying to escape the wall of sand and wind bearing down on them. I could see the building starting to fade, starting to cross over into wherever it ended up. But I could also see other times, other moments. I saw myself, dozens of versions of myself, standing in this same spot across different years. Some of them were older, some younger. Some were wearing different uniforms, carrying different weapons. All of them watching. All of them trying to understand. And behind all of it, beneath all of it, I saw what mile marker 83 really was. It wasn't a place or a threshold or any of the things I'd been thinking. It was a scar. A wound in time itself, created when Station 7 had been torn from one moment and scattered across all moments. The dust storm had done more than destroy a building. It had punched a hole through the fabric of everything, creating a spot where past and present and future all existed at once. Station 7 wasn't trapped in 1947. It was trapped in every year simultaneously, and everyone who'd ever gotten close enough to see it, everyone who'd ever responded to a call at mile marker 83, had become part of that same eternal moment, including me. I looked down at my hands. They were starting to fade, starting to become transparent like the other me had been. I could see through my fingers to the road beneath them. The process was beginning. I was crossing over. But I'd seen something else in those fractured moments. I'd seen that the scar wasn't permanent. It was held together by repetition, by the pattern of officers responding to calls, finding the station, becoming trapped. Every time someone new fell into the pattern, the scar got stronger, more stable, harder to heal. Which meant that if someone could break the pattern, I pulled out my radio. My hands were almost completely transparent now. I could barely feel the plastic casing under my fingers, but I managed to key the mic. "Dispatch," I said, my voice sounding distant even to my own ears. "This is Unit 23. I need you to listen carefully. I'm at mile marker 83, and I need you to update the patrol protocols for this sector." Static, then Sarah's voice, concerned. "Unit 23, you're coming in broken. What's your status?" "Dispatch, I need you to mark mile marker 83 as a no-response zone. Any calls coming from this area should be logged but not answered. Any reports of disturbances should be noted but not investigated. Do you copy?" "Unit 23, I can't authorize that without a supervisor." "Then get a supervisor, get the sheriff, get whoever you need. But this is critical dispatch. No one responds to mile marker 83. No one investigates. No one comes out here. Mark it as a dead zone." There was a long pause. When Sarah spoke again, her voice was different, urgent. "Cole, what's happening? Are you okay?" I looked down at myself. I was barely there anymore, just an outline of a person filled with desert air. But the scar around me was starting to change. The fractured images were becoming less stable, flickering in and out. By removing myself from the pattern, by refusing to complete the cycle, I was weakening it. "I'm ending my shift," I said into the radio. "Tell my daughter. Tell Emma that I'm sorry I missed her birthday. Tell her Daddy had one more call to answer." "Cole, wait." I dropped the radio and walked toward the Station 7. The building was starting to fade too, becoming more translucent with each step I took. Inside, I could see the officers looking around in confusion as the walls around them began to dissolve. The other me was standing in the doorway. He looked solid again, real again, but different. Younger somehow, like the weight of those eternal years was lifting. "You did it," he said. "You broke the pattern. The scar is closing." "What happens to all of you?" I asked. "We get to finish our shift. We get to go home." He looked past me, out at the desert that was becoming more real as the station became less so. "We get to rest." Behind him, the other officers were standing up from their desks, setting down their phones, closing their report books. They all looked tired but relieved, like people finishing a long day of work. One by one, they walked toward the door, toward the desert that was no longer trapped in 1947. As each officer stepped outside, they faded completely, dissolving into the night air like smoke. But they were smiling. After decades of being caught in that eternal moment, they were finally free. The other me was the last one left. He stood in the doorway looking at me. "Thank you, Deputy Briggs, for being brave enough to stay, for being smart enough to see what needed to be done. Will I?" I looked down at my hands. They were almost gone now. "Will I make it back? I don't know. You're part of the scar too now, part of the moment that's closing. But maybe if you run, if you get back to your patrol car before midnight hits, before the scar closes completely." I checked my watch. 11:59 p.m. 1 minute. I ran. I ran back down that impossible road, my feet barely touching the pavement that was already starting to disappear. I ran past mile marker 0, which was crumbling into dust even as I passed it. I ran through the desert that was rearranging itself around me, mountains appearing and disappearing, the terrain changing with every step. Behind me, I could hear Station 7 collapsing. Not with a crash, but with a sound like a sigh, like something that had been holding its breath for 70 years, finally letting go. I could see my patrol car ahead, parked where I'd left it on the shoulder of Highway 67. It looked so normal, so real, so solid compared to everything else around me. I pushed harder, running faster than I'd ever run in my life, racing against the second hand on my watch. 58 seconds, 59, midnight. I dove toward my patrol car and everything went white. When I came to, I was sitting in my cruiser with my head against the steering wheel and the engine running. My radio was squawking. "Unit 23, please respond. Unit 23, we need confirmation of your status." I grabbed the mic with the hands that were solid again, real again. "Unit 23, I'm here, dispatch. I'm okay." "Copy that, Unit 23. You've been off the air for 43 minutes. We were about to send backup." 43 minutes. I looked at my watch. 12:43 a.m. I'd lost almost an hour, but I was back. I was real. I was alive. I looked in my rearview mirror, back toward where mile marker 83 should be. But something was different. The desert looked wrong. Too empty, too normal. Like something that had been there for a long time was now missing. I put the car in gear and drove north, away from that spot. I didn't look back again. That was 4 years ago. I'm retired now, living in Albuquerque. I don't talk about what happened that night. Who would believe me? A story about a road that doesn't exist, a station trapped in time, and a scar in reality that was held together by the pattern of officers making the same mistake over and over. But sometimes, late at night, I drive out into the desert. Not to Texas, but to the empty places in New Mexico, Arizona, Nevada. Places where the stars are bright and the roads are long and you can go hours without seeing another soul. And sometimes, just sometimes, I see things. Mile markers that shouldn't exist. Roads that aren't on any map. Buildings that appear for a moment and then fade away like mirages. I never investigate. I never stop. I learned my lesson at mile marker 83, but I always wonder how many other scars there are out there. How many other places where reality broke and never quite healed right. How many other officers are trapped in their own eternal moments, working shifts that never end, taking calls that will never be resolved. The border between Texas and Mexico is almost 300 miles long. That's a lot of empty space, a lot of places where things can go wrong. A lot of spots where the boundary between what is and what shouldn't be might be thin enough to cross. I got lucky. I found a way to break the pattern, to close the scar, to free the officers trapped in Station 7. But there are other patterns out there, other scars, other places where the rules don't quite work the way they should. And sometimes, late at night when I can't sleep, I think about all the deputies and border patrol agents and state troopers working those lonely stretches of highway. I think about the calls they answer, the things they see, the moments when reality doesn't quite make sense. I hope they're smarter than I was. I hope they know when to turn around, when to mark something as a no-response zone, when to break the pattern before it breaks them. Because out there in the darkness, in the spaces between the mile markers, there are doors that shouldn't be opened, roads that shouldn't be followed, calls that shouldn't be answered. And once you answer them, once you step through those doors and follow those roads, you might never find your way back to the world you knew. I keep the radio from that night, the one I dropped in the desert before I ran back to my patrol car. I found it on my kitchen table 3 days after everything happened, sitting there like someone had delivered it. When I turn it on, I sometimes hear voices, officers calling in their positions, reporting their status, asking for backup. But when I check the frequencies, they're all empty. Dead air. The voices are coming from somewhere else, somewhere that exists in the spaces between the seconds on my watch. I never respond, never key the mic, never try to talk back, because I know that if I answer that call, I might end up right back where I started. Standing on a road that doesn't exist, watching my watch tick toward 11:58, waiting for the moment when reality splits open, and I have to choose whether to run or stay. And next time, I might not be fast enough. Next time, the scar might not close. Next time, I might become one of those voices on the radio, calling out from a place that no one can reach, working a shift that never ends. So I keep the radio off most days. Keep it locked in a drawer where I don't have to see it or hear it or think about what it represents. But some nights, when the desert is quiet and the stars are bright, I take it out. I hold it in my hands and listen to the silence, broken only by those distant voices, still working, still patrolling, still answering calls that will never be resolved. And I remember that for 2 minutes every night, from 11:58 p.m. to midnight, there are places along the border where the boundary between worlds grows thin. Places where you can see things that shouldn't be there. Roads that aren't on any map. Buildings that exist in all times and no time simultaneously. The smart thing would be to forget, to never think about mile marker 83 again, to file that night away as a hallucination or a stress reaction or anything other than what it really was. But I can't forget, because somewhere out there, right now, another deputy is probably getting a call about a disturbance near a remote mile marker. Another officer is probably walking into the desert, following voices they shouldn't be able to hear, finding roads they shouldn't be able to see. And when they check their watch at 11:58 p.m., they'll have to make the same choice I did. Run or stay. Break the pattern or become part of it. I hope they choose wisely. I hope they're faster than I was. I hope they make it back before midnight. But deep down, I know the truth. The scars are still out there. The patterns still repeat. And somewhere, in the spaces between the mile markers and the minutes, Station 7 might be gone. But something else has probably already taken its place. That's just the nature of the border, the nature of those thin places where our world touches something we were never meant to see. And as long as there are officers working those lonely night shifts, answering calls in the darkness, driving roads that stretch into infinity, the patterns will continue. The scars will form. And every once in a while at exactly 11:58 p.m., reality will split open just enough for someone to see what lies beneath. I just hope they're smart enough to look away, because once you've seen it, once you've stood in that moment between seconds and watched the world fracture around you, you can never quite unsee it, and you spend the rest of your life wondering if you're really here, really real, or if some part of you is still standing on that impossible road, trapped in a moment that never ends, working a shift that has no morning. That's my story. That's what happened at mile marker 83. Believe it or don't, I don't care anymore. I just hope you never get a call from that stretch of highway. And if you do, keep driving. Don't stop. Don't investigate. And whatever you do, don't check your watch at 11:58 p.m. Because some patterns, once you see them, you can never break free. And some shifts never really end. My name is Mason Harper, and I've been a deputy with the Brewster County Sheriff's Department for 12 years. 12 years of patrolling the emptiest, most unforgiving stretch of the Texas-Mexico border you can imagine. Out here, the desert doesn't care who you are or what badge you wear. It just waits, patient and indifferent, for you to make a mistake. I'm telling you this because what happened to me last October changed everything I thought I knew about these roads, about time, about the nature of reality itself. And because if I don't tell someone, if I don't get this out, I think it might drive me completely insane. It started on October 23rd, 2021. A Tuesday night, unusually cold for that time of year. I remember checking the thermometer on my dashboard as I started my shift. 54 degrees, with a forecast calling for clear skies and a full moon. Perfect conditions for patrol work. Good visibility, cool enough that you could work without sweating through your uniform, but not so cold that your fingers went numb when you had to handle equipment. I was assigned to the northern sector that night, which meant I'd be covering about 200 square miles of mostly empty desert between Alpine and the border. It's the kind of territory where you might go your entire shift without seeing another living soul. Just you, your thoughts, and the endless ribbon of asphalt stretching into the darkness. The shift started normal enough. I checked in with dispatch at 10 p.m., ran through my equipment check, and headed out on my usual route. Highway 118 south, then east on Ranch Road 2627, looping back north through a series of unnamed dirt roads that connected remote ranches and oil pump stations. I'd driven this route hundreds of times. I knew every turn, every cattle guard, every place where flash floods had washed out the shoulder and left deep ruts in the road. I could probably drive it blindfolded if I had to. Around 11:30 p.m., I was heading north on one of those unnamed dirt roads. Locals called it the Miller Track, after the family that had owned the land back in the 1950s. It was a straight shot for about 15 miles, cutting through flat scrubland dotted with mesquite and creosote bushes. Nothing out there but jackrabbits and the occasional coyote. That's when I saw it. A road branching off to the east. A paved road, 2 lanes, with fresh yellow lines down the center, and what looked like newly installed reflectors along the shoulder. I slowed down, confused. There was no paved road here. I'd driven past this exact spot at least twice a week for 12 years, and there had never been anything but open desert on the east side of Miller Track. I pulled over and got out of my cruiser, leaving the engine running and the headlights on. The new road was right there, clear as day in my headlights. Not a dirt track or a ranch access road, but an actual, paved highway that looked like it had been built within the last year. I walked up to where the roads intersected. There was even a road sign, the official green and white kind that the State Highway Department uses. It read, Border Patrol Route 19, authorized vehicles only. Border Patrol Route 19. I'd never heard of it. And I knew every official road, every patrol route, every access point in my sector. This wasn't on any map. This wasn't in any of the briefings. This road did not exist. But here it was, solid and real under my boots. I pulled out my phone and opened the GPS mapping app. According to the satellite view, I was standing in the middle of empty desert. The Miller track showed up clearly, but there was no indication of any intersecting road, just blank terrain. I switched to the county road map we kept in our patrol vehicles. Same thing. Miller track was marked, but nothing crossed it at this location. I grabbed my radio. "Dispatch, this is Unit 17. I'm on Miller track about 8 miles north of the 118 junction. I've got a question about the roads in this sector." Static, then Karen's voice. Karen had been our night dispatcher for 6 years, and she knew the county's road system as well as any of us. "Go ahead, Unit 17. "Karen, is there a Border Patrol Route 19 out here? Paved road, looks fairly new. Intersecting Miller track?" There was a pause. "Negative, Unit 17. I'm not showing any Border Patrol Route 19 in the system. And there's definitely no paved roads crossing Miller track in that area. You sure about your location?" I looked at my GPS unit mounted on the dashboard. The coordinates matched exactly where I thought I was. "I'm sure. I'm looking right at it. Paved road, road sign, the whole deal." "Stand by, Unit 17. I could hear her typing, probably pulling up satellite imagery and road databases. While I waited, I walked a little way down the new road. The pavement was smooth, recently laid. I could still smell that distinct asphalt smell, like the road had been finished within the last few months. About 50 yards down there was another sign. "BP Station 19, 3 miles. A Border Patrol station, 3 miles away. On a road that didn't exist, leading to a facility that wasn't on any map. Karen came back on the radio. "Unit 17, I'm not finding anything in the system. No Border Patrol Route 19, no station with that designation. Are you sure this isn't a private road? Maybe a ranch access? It's got State Highway Department signage, and it says authorized vehicles only. This looks official, Karen. Hold on, let me check with the Border Patrol dispatcher." I waited, standing in the middle of that impossible road, feeling the night air getting colder. The full moon was rising now, casting everything in that strange silver light that makes the desert look like an alien landscape. 5 minutes later, Karen came back. "Unit 17, Border Patrol has no record of a Route 19 or any station with that designation in Brewster County. They're saying their nearest facility to your location is the checkpoint on 118, about 40 miles south." "Copy that," I said, but I wasn't sure what to make of it. The road was here. The signs were here. This wasn't a hallucination or a mistake. This was real. "Do you want me to send backup to your location?" Karen asked. I thought about it. What would I tell another deputy? That I'd found a road that shouldn't exist? That there was a Border Patrol station 3 miles away that wasn't in anyone's database? Negative. I'm going to check it out. I'll report back in 15. "Copy that, Unit 17. Be careful." I got back in my cruiser and turned onto Border Patrol Route 19. The transition from dirt to pavement was seamless. No bump or change in elevation. Just smooth, new asphalt under my tires. The road ran straight east for about a mile, then started to curve slightly to the north. On either side, the desert looked normal. Scrub brush, occasional rocks, the same landscape I'd been patrolling for 12 years. But something felt off. The shadows were wrong somehow, falling at angles that didn't quite match the position of the moon. At the 2-mile mark, I passed another sign. "BP Station 19, 1 mile. My hands were gripping the steering wheel tighter than they should have been. Every instinct I'd developed over 12 years of police work was telling me something was wrong, that I should turn around and get back to Miller Track. But I kept driving. I needed to know what was at the end of this road. The station appeared suddenly, rising out of the desert like it had always been there. It was a standard Border Patrol facility, low, rectangular building with a flat roof, painted in that distinctive green and white color scheme. There were several vehicles parked outside, 2 Border Patrol SUVs, what looked like an administrative sedan, and a maintenance truck. Lights were on inside the building. I could see people moving around through the windows. I pulled into the parking area and sat there for a moment, trying to decide what to do. This facility looked real. The vehicles looked real. The people inside looked real. But according to every database, every map, every official source, none of this should exist. I got out of my cruiser and walked toward the main entrance. There was a plaque mounted beside the door. U.S. Border Patrol Station 19, established 2019. 2 years ago. A fully operational Border Patrol station had been built 2 years ago, and somehow no one in the county sheriff's department knew about it. I pushed open the door and stepped inside. The interior was exactly what you'd expect from a Border Patrol facility. A reception area with a desk, a waiting area with plastic chairs, hallways leading to offices and holding cells. Everything looked clean, new, official. But the thing that made my skin crawl was the silence. The lights were on. I could see coffee cups on desks, papers spread out like someone had just been working on them. Computer monitors were active, showing security camera feeds and what looked like patrol routes. But there were no people. "Hello?" I called out. "Border Patrol? This is Brewster County Sheriff's Department." No response. I walked deeper into the facility, my hand resting on my service weapon. The halls were empty. The offices were empty. Even the holding cells were empty, though one of them had a blanket spread out on the bench like someone had been sleeping there recently. I found the operations center, a large room with multiple computer workstations and a wall of monitors showing various camera feeds. All the equipment was running, but there was no one there to operate it. On one of the monitors, I could see my patrol car in the parking lot, the image crystal clear from the security camera outside. I could see myself standing in the operations center, looking at the monitors. The image on the screen and my actual position matched perfectly, except the timestamp on the security footage was wrong. According to the timestamp, it was 11:47 p.m., but when I checked my watch, it showed 12:03 a.m. I'd lost 16 minutes somewhere. I pulled out my phone. It showed 12:03 a.m., same as my watch. But all the clocks in the station, all the computer timestamps, they all showed 11:47 p.m. I grabbed my radio. "Dispatch, Unit 17. What time do you have?" 12:03 a.m., Unit 17. "Everything okay?" "Yeah, just checking. Can you confirm my location?" There was a pause while Karen checked her system. "You're showing on Miller Track, about 8 miles north of 118. Haven't moved in the last half hour." "Copy that." But I wasn't on Miller Track. I was 3 miles east, in a Border Patrol station that shouldn't exist. Yet according to dispatch, my GPS tracker still showed me on that dirt road. I went back outside. My cruiser was where I'd left it, but now there were other vehicles in the parking lot that hadn't been there before. 5 additional Border Patrol SUVs, all parked in perfect formation, all empty. The moon had moved. Not the way it normally moves across the sky, but jumped, like someone had cut out 15 minutes of time and spliced the remaining parts together. The shadows had shifted dramatically and the air temperature had dropped at least 10 degrees. I got in my cruiser and started the engine. Every fiber of my being was screaming at me to get out of there, to drive back down Border Patrol Route 19 and get back to Miller Track, back to roads that existed on maps, back to a world that made sense. I put the car in reverse and turned around. The road stretched out behind me. illuminated by my headlights. Same smooth pavement, same yellow lines, same reflectors along the shoulder. I started driving back the way I'd come, but something was wrong. The distance markers were counting up instead of down. BP Station 19, 2 miles, became BP Station 19, 3 miles, even though I was driving away from the facility. I drove faster. The mile markers kept increasing. 4 miles, 5 miles, 6 miles. I should have reached Miller Track by now. I should have been back on familiar ground. But the road just kept going, straight and endless, stretching into darkness that my headlights couldn't quite penetrate. I checked my odometer. I'd driven 11 miles from the station, but the distance markers now showed BP Station 19, 11 miles, and were still counting up. I was moving away from Miller Track, even though I was heading back the way I'd come. That's when I saw the lights in my rearview mirror. A vehicle was behind me, closing fast. As it got closer, I could see it was a Border Patrol SUV, light bar flashing. It pulled up behind me and hit the siren, the universal signal for a traffic stop. Out here, on a road that didn't exist, with time running backwards and distances that didn't make sense. I pulled over. The Border Patrol vehicle stopped behind me, but no one got out. I could see someone in the driver's seat, but the glare from my brake lights made it impossible to see details. I waited. Protocol dictated that I should identify myself as a law enforcement, but something told me to be careful. Something about this whole situation was fundamentally wrong. After what felt like several minutes, but might have been seconds, I couldn't trust my perception of time anymore. My radio crackled. But it wasn't Karen's voice, it was my voice. Unit 17, this is Unit 17. You need to turn around. You need to go back to the station. I grabbed the mic, my hand shaking. Who is this? Identify yourself. This is Deputy Mason Harper, Unit 17, Brewster County Sheriff's Department. And you need to turn around. You're going the wrong way. I am Mason Harper, I said. What kind of... Not yet. You're not. Not out here. Time doesn't work the same way on this road. You're trying to go back, but back doesn't exist yet. You have to go forward. I looked in my rearview mirror. The figure in the Border Patrol vehicle was moving now, getting out. As they walked toward my cruiser, I could see them clearly in my mirror-mounted spotlight. It was me. Same uniform, same face, same everything. But older, maybe 10, 15 years older. Heavier, with more gray in the hair and deeper lines around the eyes. The older version of me walked up to my window. I rolled it down, even though every instinct told me not to. "Deputy Harper," he said, his voice exactly like mine, but with a weariness I hadn't heard before. "You need to listen carefully. You found Border Patrol Route 19, and now you're caught in it. This road exists outside normal time, outside normal space. The only way to get back to Miller Track is to complete the loop." "What loop? What are you talking about?" "Drive forward. Go to Station 19. Stay there until your watch shows 11:47 p.m. Then leave. Drive west. Don't stop. Don't look back. And when you get to Miller Track, keep going. Don't ever turn onto this road again." This doesn't make sense. None of this makes sense. The older me smiled, but there was no humor in it. It doesn't have to make sense. It just is. This road was built in 2019, but it wasn't built in our timeline. It was built in a different version of October 2019, where different choices were made and different outcomes occurred. And somehow, the two timelines overlap right here, right at this spot on Miller Track. That's impossible. You're talking to yourself through a car window on a road that doesn't exist. Impossible stopped mattering about 20 minutes ago. I looked at him, at me, trying to find some sign that this was a hallucination or a trick. But he looked real, solid. He even had the same scar on his left hand that I'd gotten from a barbed wire fence 10 years ago. "What happens if I don't go back?" I asked. "Then you end up like the others, the ones who tried to fight it, who tried to drive off the road or call for help or do anything except complete the loop. They're still out here, driving in circles, trying to find their way back to a world that moved on without them." How many? I stopped counting after 30, but there are more. There are always more. This road attracts people who shouldn't find it, who make wrong turns or take shortcuts or just get unlucky. And once you're on it, the only way off is to follow the rules. He leaned closer to my window. "I'm you from 15 years ahead. I've been driving this road for 15 years, Mason. 15 years of the same shift, the same patrol, the same moment repeated over and over. Don't become me. Complete the loop. Get back to Miller Track and never come back here. How do I know you're telling the truth?" He pulled out his wallet and handed me a photo. It was worn, faded, but I could make out the image. Me and my wife Jennifer, standing in front of the courthouse on our wedding day. That wedding was scheduled for next month, November 20th. We'd sent out the invitations 3 weeks ago, but in the photo, Jennifer looked older, and she was standing alone in front of the courthouse wearing black, a funeral dress. "That's from your funeral," the older me said softly. 2 years from now. You die on this road, Mason. You die because you didn't listen when I tried to warn you, because you thought you could figure it out, could break the rules, could be smarter than the road." He took the photo back. "But maybe this time will be different. Maybe this time you'll listen. Maybe this time you'll complete the loop and get out. And if I do, what happens to you? I don't know. Maybe I disappear. Maybe I finally finish my shift. Or maybe I just keep driving, keep warning versions of myself who stumble onto this road, keep trying to save us from making the same mistakes over and over." He stepped back from my window. "Drive forward, Mason. Go back to Station 19. Wait for 11:47. Then leave, and don't look back. That's the only way." I wanted to argue, wanted to demand more answers, wanted to understand how any of this could be possible. But the older version of me was already walking back to his vehicle. "Wait," I called out. "What happened? What choices were different in that other 2019? He stopped and looked back at me. The Border Patrol built Station 19 as a test facility. They were experimenting with surveillance technology, trying to monitor the desert in ways that hadn't been possible before. But something went wrong. The equipment they were using, it did something to time and space, created a bubble where normal rules didn't apply. And then they tried to cover it up, to erase Station 19 from all the records, to pretend it never existed. But the road is still here. The road is still here, he agreed. And it will be here forever, waiting for people like us to find it, waiting to trap them in loops they can't escape. He got back in his vehicle and drove past me, heading in the direction I'd been going, which was somehow now the direction of Station 19. As he passed, he raised his hand in a wave that looked like goodbye. I sat there for a long time, trying to decide what to do. Part of me wanted to ignore his warning, to try driving off the road into the desert, to call for backup and demand that someone explain what was happening. But I'd seen the photo, seen Jennifer at my funeral, seen proof that if I didn't follow the rules, this road would kill me. I put my cruiser in drive and headed back toward Station 19. The mile markers counted down normally this time. 5 miles, 4 miles, 3 miles. And then I was pulling back into the parking lot, which was now full of vehicles. At least 20 Border Patrol SUVs, all parked in perfect rows, all empty. The station was still deserted, still silent. still frozen in that moment at 11:47 p.m. according to all the clocks inside. I checked my watch. 12:31 a.m. I had to wait until it was 11:47 again. But was that 11:47 p.m. tonight? Tomorrow night? How did time even work here? I decided to wait inside, in the operations center where I could watch the monitors. I made coffee from the pot that was still warm in the break room. I sat in one of the office chairs and watched the security feeds, looking for any sign of movement, any indication that I wasn't alone here. The cameras showed the empty parking lot, the empty halls, the empty holding cells. Nothing moved. Nothing changed. Except on one monitor, the one showing the view from a camera I hadn't noticed before. It was pointing east, toward the desert beyond the station, and in the distance I could see lights, dozens of them, vehicles moving in the darkness, following paths that made no sense, circling and weaving through the scrubland like they were looking for something, or running from something. I watched those lights for what felt like hours, though my watch insisted only 30 minutes had passed. I wondered which of those vehicles was the older version of me, still driving, still trapped in his own loop, still trying to warn others not to make the mistakes he'd made. I wondered how many of those vehicles had sheriffs or deputies or state troopers inside, all of them lost on roads that shouldn't exist, all of them looking for a way back to the world they knew. And I wondered if completing the loop would really set me free, or if I was just beginning a journey that would never end. At 11:47 p.m., according to my watch, though I'd long since stopped trusting time, I left the station and got back in my cruiser. The moon was in a different position now, impossible given the passage of time, but I'd stopped questioning the impossible. I drove west, away from Station 19, following the road that should lead back to Miller Track. The mile markers counted up the way they should. 1 mile, 2 miles, 3 miles. And then, suddenly, I was back on dirt road. The pavement ended abruptly, transitioning to the familiar ruts and gravel of Miller Track. I looked in my rearview mirror, expecting to see Border Patrol Route 19 stretching behind me, but there was nothing. Just empty desert. The road was gone. I grabbed at my radio. Dispatch, Unit 17. I'm back on Miller Track. Everything's fine. Copy that, Unit 17. Karen sounded relieved. You've been off the air for almost 2 hours. We were getting worried. 2 hours? I checked my watch. It showed 1:47 a.m., but I'd been gone since 11:30 p.m. That was 2 hours and 17 minutes. Sorry, dispatch, I was investigating something. Lost track of time. Do you need to file a report? I thought about it. What would I say? That I'd found a road that didn't exist? That I'd talked to a future version of myself? That I'd waited in an abandoned Border Patrol station while time ran in circles? Negative. False alarm. I'm 10-8. I drove the rest of my shift in a daze, following my normal route, trying to process what had happened. As the sun started to rise around 6 a.m., painting the desert in shades of orange and gold, I passed the spot where Border Patrol Route 19 house had been. There was no sign of it, no intersection, no road sign, just empty scrubland exactly the way it had always been. But I knew it was there, waiting, existing in some space between one moment and the next, between one timeline and another, waiting for the next person to find it, to drive down its impossible length, to get caught in a loop they might never escape. I thought about the older version of me, still driving, still trapped. Had I just seen my own future? Or had I managed to avoid it? I wouldn't know for sure until next month, until November 20th, until my wedding day, if I made it that far. I made it to the wedding. November 20th, 2021. Jennifer and I got married in front of the Brewster County Courthouse, just like we'd planned. My fellow deputies were there. Karen from dispatch brought flowers. Even Sheriff Rollins showed up, which was rare for him. He usually avoided social events like the plague. Everything was perfect. Everything was normal. And I kept waiting for something to go wrong, for reality to fracture the way it had on Border Patrol Route 19. But nothing happened. The ceremony went smoothly. We took photos on the courthouse steps. We had dinner at the Riata, the nicest restaurant in Alpine. We spent our wedding night in the same house we'd been living in for 2 years, and I fell asleep next to my wife without any nightmares about impossible roads or conversations with older versions of myself. For 3 weeks, I almost convinced myself it had all been a stress-induced hallucination. The long hours, the isolation of night shift patrol, the endless stretches of empty desert. Maybe my mind had just cracked a little. Maybe I'd fallen asleep at the wheel and dreamed the whole thing. But I knew better. Because I'd kept the photo, the one the older me had shown me, the one with Jennifer in funeral dress standing alone in front of the courthouse. I'd taken it from his hand before he could pull it away, and when I'd gotten home that night, I'd found it in my jacket pocket. I kept it hidden in my locker at the station. Sometimes, during my breaks, I'd take it out and stare at it. The photo was real. The date stamp on the back said October 23rd, 2023. Exactly 2 years after the night I'd found the road. And Jennifer's face was unmistakable, aged by grief and time, wearing black at what could only be my funeral. The photo was proof that Border Patrol Route 19 existed. Proof that time didn't work the same way on that road. Proof that somewhere in some timeline, I'd made different choices and ended up trapped or dead. But I'd escaped. I'd followed the older me's instructions. I'd completed the loop. I was free. Except I wasn't. It started small. Little things I barely noticed at first. I'd be driving my patrol route and lose track of time. Not dramatically, just 5 or 10 minutes here and there. I'd look at my watch and realize I couldn't remember the last 15 minutes of driving, though my patrol log showed I'd been checking in with dispatch regularly. Then there were the dreams. Every night, I'd dream about Border Patrol Route 19. I'd be driving down that impossible road, watching the mile markers count up when they should count down, trying to reach Miller Track and never quite getting there. Sometimes, I'd see other vehicles on the road, all of them going in circles, all of them driven by people who looked lost and desperate. Sometimes, I'd see the older version of me, still in his Border Patrol vehicle, still patrolling a route that never ended. I tried to talk to Jennifer about it, tried to explain what I'd experienced that night in October. But how do you tell your new wife that you've seen her at your funeral? How do you explain that you met a future version of yourself who'd been trapped in a time loop for 15 years? I couldn't, so I kept it inside. Let it eat at me while I smiled and played the role of the newlywed deputy who had everything figured out. In December, I started avoiding Miller Track. I'd file my patrol plans to include that road, but then at the last minute, I'd take different routes, longer routes that kept me away from that 8-mile stretch where Border Patrol Route 19 had appeared. The other deputies noticed. My patrol logs showed increasing discrepancies between planned routes and actual routes. Sheriff Rollins called me into his office in early January. "Mason, you want to tell me what's going on?" He was sitting behind his desk, my patrol records spread out in front of him. "You've been avoiding Miller Track for 2 months. Every shift, you file a plan that includes it, and then you take detours, sometimes adding an extra hour or more to your patrol time." I tried to come up with a reasonable explanation. "The road's been rough lately. Flash flood damage from those storms in November. I've been taking Highway 118 instead. It's better maintained." Highway 118 is 40 miles out of your way. And I drove Miller Track myself last week. It's fine. So what's really going on? I wanted to tell him. Wanted to explain about the impossible road and the station that shouldn't exist. But I could already imagine how that conversation would go. Psychiatric evaluation. Forced leave. Maybe even dismissal if they decided I was unstable. Nothing, Sheriff. I'll stick to my planned routes from now on. You do that, because if I see any more discrepancies, we're going to have a longer conversation about your fitness for duty. That night, I drove Miller Track for the first time since October. My hands were sweating on the steering wheel as I approached the 8-mile mark, the spot where Border Patrol Route 19 had appeared. But there was nothing there. Just empty desert on both sides of the dirt road. No paved intersection. No road signs. No indication that anything unusual had ever existed in this spot. I pulled over and got out, shining my flashlight into the scrubland. I walked 100 yards into the desert, looking for any sign of pavement, any indication that the road was still there, just hidden somehow. Nothing. I got back in my cruiser and continued my patrol, feeling both relieved and unsettled. Maybe it was over. Maybe the road only appeared once, a single moment of weakness in reality that had closed itself up and moved on. But 2 weeks later, it happened again. I was on Miller Track, same section, same time of night, around 11:30 p.m. And suddenly, there it was. Border Patrol Route 19, intersecting the dirt road, looking exactly the way it had in October. Fresh pavement, new signs, everything pristine and impossible. This time, I didn't hesitate. I drove right past it. Didn't slow down, didn't investigate. Just kept going north on Miller Track like I hadn't seen anything. My radio crackled. Unit 17, this is Unit 17. You need to stop. You need to turn around. I recognized the voice immediately. The older version of me. Still out there, still trapped. I keyed my mic. Negative. I completed the loop in October. I'm not going back. It doesn't work that way, Mason. The road doesn't let go. It pulls you back. Every time you pass it, every time you ignore it, the pull gets stronger. Eventually, you won't be able to resist. You'll turn onto it without even realizing what you're doing. That's not going to happen. That's what I said too, 12 years ago, when I first found the road. I thought I could avoid it. Thought I could be strong enough to resist. But I was wrong. The road always wins. I wanted to argue, but I could feel it, that pull, like a magnet drawing iron filings. My hands wanted to turn the steering wheel. My foot wanted to ease off the gas, to slow down and turn around and drive back to that intersection. I gripped the wheel tighter and accelerated, putting distance between myself and Border Patrol Route 19. You can't run from it forever, the older me said through the radio. The road exists in multiple times, multiple places. You might pass it once, twice, a dozen times, but eventually you'll be tired, distracted, and you'll turn onto it without meaning to, and then you'll be trapped, just like me. Then what do? I shouted at the radio. How do I make it stop? You don't. Once you've found the road, once you've driven it, you're marked. The road knows you, and it will keep calling you back until you answer. The radio went silent. I drove the rest of my shift without seeing the road again, but I could feel it. Out there in the darkness. Waiting. Over the next 3 months, the pattern became clear. The road appeared once, sometimes twice a week. Always at night. Always in the same spot on Miller Track. And every time I had to fight the urge to turn onto it. The older me would call on the radio, sometimes warning me, sometimes pleading with me to stay away. Other times, I'd see vehicles in the desert off to the east, Border Patrol SUVs and sheriff's cruisers driving in complex patterns that made no sense, all of them caught in their own loops. I started documenting everything, made notes about each appearance of the road, took photos when I could, though they always came out blurred or overexposed, like the camera couldn't quite focus on something that shouldn't exist. I researched the history of the area, looking for any explanation. Found references to experiments conducted by the Border Patrol in 2019. Classified reports about surveillance technology that had gone wrong. Mentions of Station 19 in documents that were quickly redacted or removed from public databases. The more I dug, the more I realized that the older me had been telling the truth. Border Patrol Route 19 was real. It existed in some fractured timeline, some version of reality that had split off from ours in 2019 when those experiments went wrong. And somehow, that fractured timeline overlapped with ours at this specific spot on Miller Track. A weak point in reality where two versions of the same place existed simultaneously. In April, I made a mistake. I was driving Miller Track on a Tuesday night, exhausted from a double shift. I'd been called in early to cover for another deputy who'd called in sick, and I'd been on patrol for nearly 16 hours. My eyes were heavy. My reactions were slow. I approached the 8-mile mark, and the road was there. Border Patrol, Route 19, perfectly normal looking, perfectly inviting. And before I fully realized what I was doing, had turned onto it. The moment my tires hit the pavement, I knew I'd made a terrible mistake. The air temperature dropped 20 degrees instantly. The moon jumped position in the sky, and my watch stopped at 11:47 p.m. Damn it, I muttered, slamming my palm against the steering wheel. Damn it, damn it, damn it. I was back on the loop. I drove toward Station 19, following the route I'd memorized from my first visit. The facility appeared exactly where it should be. Still empty. Still frozen in time. I pulled into the parking lot and killed the engine. For a long moment, I just sat there, trying to figure out what to do. The older me had said I needed to complete the loop to get back. Wait until 11:47, then drive west to Miller Track. But what if it didn't work this time? What if the road had changed the rules? My radio crackled. "Welcome back, Mason." I grabbed the mic. I didn't mean to come back. I was exhausted. I didn't realize what I was doing until it was too late. I know. That's how it happens. That's how it always happens. The older me's voice was sad, resigned. You think you can be careful. You think you can stay alert. But eventually you slip. And then you're back on the loop. Tell me how to get off permanently. There has to be a way. You wouldn't still be here, still trying to warn people, if there wasn't some way to break free. There was a long silence, then, "There might be, but it's dangerous. More dangerous than just completing the loop. Tell me." The road exists because of the experiments at Station 19. They created the fracture in reality. So, theoretically, if someone could destroy the equipment that caused the fracture, the road might collapse, might cease to exist. What equipment? Where is it? In the station, in the basement. They built a facility underground, tried to keep it secret. That's where they conducted the experiments. That's where the breach between timelines occurred. I looked at the station building. I'd been inside on my first visit, but I hadn't seen any stairs leading to a basement. Just offices and holding cells in the operations center. How do I access it? Through the holding cells. There's a panel in the floor of cell 3. Looks like part of the concrete, but it's actually a door. You need a security code to open it. 1947. The year of the original Station 7 incident. Everything connects, Mason. All these loops and fractures and impossible roads, they all connect back to Border Station 7 disappearing in that dust storm. That event created the first weak point, and every attempt to study it, to understand it, to exploit it, just made things worse. I got out of my cruiser and walked toward the station. The building was just as empty as before. Lights on, equipment running, but no people. I made my way to the holding cells. Cell 3 was at the end of the hall. I stepped inside and examined the floor. It took me several minutes to find it. A rectangular section of concrete that was slightly different in color and texture from the rest. I felt around the edges and found a small keypad, barely visible. I entered the code, 1947. The panel clicked and lifted an inch. I pulled it up fully, revealing a metal staircase descending into darkness below. I turned on my flashlight and started down. The basement was larger than I'd expected. It wasn't just a small underground room, but a full facility. Multiple rooms connected by corridors, all of them filled with equipment I didn't recognize. Monitors showing data I couldn't interpret. Machines humming with power. And at the center of it all, in a large chamber, was something that looked like it came from a science fiction movie. It was a circular platform, maybe 20 feet in diameter, surrounded by towers of equipment covered in blinking lights and displays. The air around the platform shimmered and distorted, like heat waves rising off summer asphalt. And in the center of the platform was a tear, a literal rip in space through which I could see something else. Another version of the desert, another timeline. Another Station 19, this one occupied, with Border Patrol agents moving around, going about their business, completely unaware that they could be seen through this impossible window. This was it. This was the source of the fracture, the equipment that had torn reality apart and created Border Patrol Route 19. My radio crackled again. "You found it?" "Yeah," I said. "Now what? How do I destroy it?" "You don't, not directly. The equipment is designed to be self-sustaining. It draws power from the fracture itself, from the boundary between timelines. You can't just unplug it or smash it." "Then what's the point? Why did you tell me to come down here?" "Because there's a fail-safe. The engineers who built this, they knew it was dangerous. They knew it might spiral out of control, so they built in a shutdown sequence. If someone activates it, the equipment will reverse the process, close the fracture, seal the breach between timelines. And what happens to the road? What happens to Station 19? It collapses, ceases to exist. All the loops end. All the people trapped in them are released." There was something in his voice. Something he wasn't saying. Released how? Do they go back to their normal lives? Do they escape? Silence. "Tell me the truth," I said. "What happens to the people on the loops when the road collapses?" "They don't go back, Mason. They never existed on this road in our timeline. They exist in the fractured timeline, the one visible through that tear. When you close the fracture, you erase that timeline. Everyone in it ceases to exist. Including you, including me, including all the versions of ourselves that got trapped here, including the Border Patrol agents in that other timeline who think they're living normal lives." I stared at the tear in space, at the other Station 19 visible through it. I could see maybe a dozen people in there, living, working, completely unaware that their entire existence was a mistake, a glitch in reality. "How many people will die if I shut this down?" I asked. "I don't know. Dozens, maybe hundreds. Everyone who exists only in the fractured timeline. Everyone who got caught in the loops and couldn't escape. I can't do that. I can't kill that many people just to save myself. Then you'll stay on the loop forever." You'll drive these roads until you forget what it's like to exist anywhere else. You'll become like me, a ghost warning yourself not to make the same mistakes over and over for eternity. I looked around the chamber trying to find another option, trying to think of some way to close the fracture without erasing everyone trapped inside it. But I couldn't see one. The equipment was beyond my understanding. The science was too complex, and I was just a deputy sheriff from a small Texas county, way out of my depth. There has to be another way, I said. There isn't. I've had 15 years to think about it. 15 years trapped in this loop, driving the same roads, having the same conversations. There's only one way out, Mason, and it requires a choice you're not ready to make. I stood there for a long time, looking at that tear in reality, thinking about Jennifer, about the wedding we'd just had, about the life we were supposed to build together, about the photo in my locker showing her at my funeral. What happens if I don't shut it down? I asked. What happens if I just complete the loop and go back to my normal life? The road keeps appearing. The pull keeps getting stronger. Eventually, you'll get trapped permanently, and Jennifer will wear that black dress to your funeral, just like in the photo. Because there won't be a body to bury. Just an empty patrol car found on Miller Track with no explanation of where you went. And if I do shut it down, if I erase the fractured timeline, the road disappears. The pull stops, you go back to your normal life and never have to think about Border Patrol Route 19 again. You get to grow old with Jennifer. You get to have the life you're supposed to have. At the cost of everyone trapped in this timeline. At the cost of people who only exist because reality broke. People who were never meant to be. I closed my eyes. This was an impossible choice. Either damn myself to an eternal loop or commit mass murder to save myself. How long do I have to decide? Until 11:47. Same as always. Complete the loop or stay here forever. I checked my watch. It showed 11:39. 8 minutes. 8 minutes to decide the fate of everyone trapped in this fractured timeline. 8 minutes to choose between their lives and mine. I stood in that underground chamber, staring at the tear in reality, watching the Border Patrol agents in the other timeline go about their work. They had no idea that their entire existence was balanced on a knife's edge, that a deputy from another timeline was standing in a basement they couldn't see, contemplating whether to erase them from existence. One of them was laughing. I could see him through the tear, talking to a colleague, gesturing animatedly while telling some story. He looked happy. He looked real. Was he real? Or was he just an echo, a glitch, a mistake that needed to be corrected? 5 minutes, Mason. The older me's voice crackled through my radio. You need to make a choice. I walked around the platform, examining the equipment. There was a control panel on one of the towers, labeled Fail-Safe Protocol. Below it was a simple switch, protected by a clear plastic cover. All I had to do was flip that switch, and the fracture would close. The road would disappear. Everyone in this timeline would cease to exist, including the older version of me who'd been trying to help me. Tell me about your 15 years, I said into the radio. What's it like being trapped in the loop? He was quiet for a moment. It's lonely. You drive the same roads, see the same empty desert, try to warn versions of yourself who sometimes listen and sometimes don't. You watch the moon rise and set in impossible patterns. You lose track of what's real and what's memory. Do you sleep? Do you eat? Sometimes. The loop provides what you need to keep going. There's always coffee at the station, food in the break room that never runs out, beds that are always made. It's like living in a dream that never ends. That sounds like hell. It is, but it's also safe. Nothing changes. Nothing gets worse. You're stuck, but you're not dead. And after 15 years, I've almost forgotten what it's like to want anything more than this. I thought about that, about spending 15 years driving in circles, never moving forward, never going back. A kind of purgatory for people who'd made wrong turns. How many of us are there? I asked. How many versions of Mason Harper are trapped in this timeline? I've counted 17. Some have been here longer than me. Some just arrived. We all drive different sections of the road. All of us caught in our own loops, occasionally crossing paths, but never really interacting. We're all alone together. 17 versions of me. 17 lives, or one life split 17 different ways. If I close the fracture, would I be killing 17 people or erasing 17 echoes of the same person? 2 minutes, he said. I put my hand on the failsafe switch, felt the smooth plastic under my palm. It would be so easy. Just flip the switch and end this. Go back to Jennifer, go back to my life, forget that any of this ever happened. But I'd remember. I'd remember the faces I saw through that tear. The Border Patrol agents who'd done nothing wrong except exist in the wrong timeline. The 17 versions of myself who'd gotten lost on this impossible road. I'd remember that I chose my life over theirs. I can't do it, I said, pulling my hand back. I can't kill all these people. There has to be another way. There isn't, the older me said, and his voice was gentle, understanding. I've had 15 years to look for another way. I've studied this equipment. I've tried to find a solution that doesn't require erasing everyone. There isn't one. Then I'll stay. I'll complete the loop and go back and take my chances. You'll end up trapped. Maybe not today, maybe not next month. But eventually, the road will catch you. And you'll spend eternity driving in circles just like me. That's my choice to make? No, he said, and his voice was harder now. It's not, because your choice affects Jennifer. Your choice affects everyone who cares about you. They'll spend years wondering what happened to you. They'll search for you. They'll mourn you. And they'll never find answers because you'll be here in a place they can't reach. Better that than being a murderer. Is it? Is it really better to condemn yourself and everyone who loves you to decades of grief and uncertainty? Is that more moral than ending an existence that should never have begun? I hated that he had a point. Hated that the moral high ground wasn't as clear as I wanted it to be. 1 minute, he said. I looked at my watch. 11:46. If I didn't leave the station in the next 60 seconds, I'd be trapped here. The loop would reset, and I'd be caught permanently. Unless I flipped the switch. Unless I closed the fracture and erased this timeline and everyone in it. 30 seconds. I thought about Jennifer, about our wedding day, about the plans we'd made for the future. Kids, a house, growing old together. About the photo showing her at my funeral. 20 seconds. I thought about the 17 versions of me driving in circles. About the Border Patrol agents visible through the tear. About the older me who'd spent 15 years trying to warn people away from this road. 10 seconds, about all the people who'd gotten lost on Border Patrol Route 19. All the families who'd never gotten closure. All the lives interrupted by a mistake, an experiment that went wrong, a fracture in reality that should never have existed. 5 seconds. I made my choice. I flipped the switch. The equipment around me screamed. Not literally, but the sound it made was the auditory equivalent of screaming, a high-pitched whine that seemed to vibrate inside my skull. The lights on the towers started flashing in complex patterns. The tear in reality began to shrink. Through it, I could see the Border Patrol agents in the other timeline looking around in confusion. They were starting to fade, becoming translucent, like ghosts. One of them, the one who'd been laughing, looked directly at the tear, looked directly at me. For a moment our eyes met, and I saw understanding in his face. He knew what was happening, knew that his timeline was ending. He didn't look angry. He looked relieved, like he'd been waiting for this moment. Like some part of him had always known his existence was temporary. He raised his hand in a wave. A goodbye. Then he was gone. They were all gone. The other timeline collapsed like a soap bubble, and the tear sealed itself shut. The equipment powered down. The humming stopped, the lights went dark, and I was standing alone in a basement that suddenly felt very real and very permanent. My radio crackled one last time. "Thank you, Mason." The older me's voice was faint now, fading. "Thank you for being strong enough to make the choice I couldn't make. For ending this. For letting us all rest." "I'm sorry," I whispered. "Don't be. We were never really alive. We were just echoes. Reflections. It's better this way." The radio went silent. Completely silent. No static, no background hum, just dead air. I climbed the stairs back to the main level of the station. The building felt different now, more solid, more real. The clocks on the walls were still stopped at 11:47, but there was a sense of finality to it. Like this moment had been frozen not because it was repeating, but because it was ending. I walked outside. The parking lot was empty now. No border patrol vehicles, no sheriff's cruisers. Just my patrol car, sitting alone under the impossibly bright stars. I got in and started the engine. Drove west, away from Station 19, following Border Patrol Route 19 toward where it should intersect with Miller Track. And then I was on dirt road. The transition was smooth, seamless. No dramatic change. No sense of crossing between timelines. Just pavement becoming gravel, and then I was back on familiar ground. I looked in my rearview mirror. Station 19 was still visible in the distance, lights on, exactly as I'd left it. But it was fading now, becoming transparent, like a mirage dissolving in the morning heat. Within seconds it was gone completely. And so was Border Patrol Route 19, just empty desert where the paved road had been. I grabbed my radio. "Dispatch, Unit 17. I'm back on Miller Track." "Copy that, Unit 17. Karen's voice was normal, professional, showing no sign that anything unusual had happened. "What's your status?" 10-8, continuing patrol." I checked my watch. It showed 11:52 p.m. Less than 5 minutes had passed since I'd turned on to Border Patrol Route 19. The entire experience in the fractured timeline, descending into the basement, examining the equipment, making the choice to close the fracture, had occurred in less time than it took to drive to the corner store. Time was strange near that fracture. But the fracture was gone now, sealed, erased from reality, along with everyone who'd existed only within it. I drove the rest of my shift on autopilot, my mind replaying everything that had happened. The faces I'd seen through the tear, the older version of me thanking me for ending his loop, the Border Patrol agent who'd waved goodbye as his timeline collapsed. I'd killed them all, erased them from existence, and I'd done it to save myself. Was that murder? Or was it just correction? Setting right something that had gone wrong? I didn't know. I still don't know. When my shift ended at 6 a.m., I drove home to Jennifer. She was in the kitchen making coffee, still in her pajamas, hair messy from sleep. She smiled when she saw me. "Hey, how was your shift?" "Quiet," I lied. "Nothing unusual." She kissed me and handed me a cup of coffee. "You okay? You look tired." "Just a long night. I'll sleep it off." But I didn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about the choice I'd made, wondering if there had really been no other option, or if I'd just taken the easy way out. That afternoon, I went to the station and opened my locker. The photo was still there, Jennifer in black, standing alone in front of the courthouse. But as I watched, the image began to fade. The colors bleached out, the details blurred, and within seconds the photo was completely blank. Just an empty piece of photo paper. The timeline where I died on Border Patrol Route 19 and had been erased. The future where Jennifer attended my funeral no longer existed. By closing the fracture, I'd changed my own fate. I should have felt relieved, grateful. I'd saved my own life and secured my future with Jennifer. Instead, I felt hollow. Over the next few weeks, I kept waiting for consequences. For some sign that what I'd done had cosmic repercussions, that erasing a timeline full of people would somehow come back to haunt me. But nothing happened. Life went on normally. I worked my shifts, came home to my wife, started thinking about the future we'd build together. And every time I drove past that 8-mile mark on Miller Track, I'd slow down and look for any sign of Border Patrol Route 19. But there was nothing, just empty desert. The road was truly gone. In June, Jennifer told me she was pregnant. We'd been talking about starting a family, but we'd planned to wait another year. The pregnancy was unexpected but welcome. We celebrated with dinner at the Riata, the same restaurant where we'd had our wedding dinner. As we drove home that night, Jennifer asleep in the passenger seat, her hand resting on her barely visible baby bump, I thought about the choice I'd made in that basement. The choice that had given me this future. Was it worth it? Was this life, this normal, happy, ordinary life, worth the cost of everyone who'd existed in that fractured timeline? I wanted to say yes, wanted to believe that I'd made the right choice. But I couldn't shake the memory of that Border Patrol agent waving goodbye as his existence ended. He'd looked relieved, but he'd also looked sad, like he was mourning the life he'd never really had. I wonder if he had a wife, if he had plans for kids, if he had dreams and hopes and fears just like mine. I wonder if, in that fractured timeline, there was another version of Jennifer, another pregnancy, another future that I'd erased with the flip of a switch. I'll never know. The fracture is closed, the timeline is gone, and I'm left with the life I chose to preserve. Most days I can live with that. I can focus on Jennifer and our baby and the future we're building. I can push down the guilt and the questions and the memory of faces fading into nothingness. But some nights, when I'm lying awake at 3 a.m., listening to Jennifer breathe beside me, I think about Border Patrol Route 19, about the road that doesn't exist anymore, about the 17 versions of me that I erased, about the older me who spent 15 years trapped in a loop before I ended him. And I wonder, if I could go back, if I could make that choice again, would I do the same thing? I don't know, and I'm afraid that not knowing makes me a coward. Our daughter was born in February 2022. We named her Claire, after Jennifer's grandmother. She was perfect. 10 fingers, 10 toes, a healthy set of lungs that she demonstrated frequently in those early weeks. Life became a blur of diaper changes and midnight feedings and the kind of exhaustion that only new parents understand. I took paternity leave, stayed home for 3 weeks, helped Jennifer navigate the overwhelming first days of motherhood. It was good, it was normal, it was everything I'd hoped for when I'd made that choice in the basement of Station 19. But the guilt never went away. I'd think about it at odd moments, while feeding Claire at 2 a.m., while changing her diaper, while rocking her to sleep. I'd think about the Border Patrol agents I'd erased, about whether any of them had children, about whether I'd ended not just their lives but the lives of their sons and daughters too, About the 17 versions of me who'd been trapped in time loops, driving the same roads forever, until I'd flipped that switch and ended them all. Were they grateful? Or did they resent me for making a choice they'd been too weak to make themselves? I'd never know. In March, I went back to work, back to the night shift, back to patrolling the empty desert roads, back to the familiar routine of calls and paperwork and long hours alone with my thoughts. And on my third shift back, I drove past that 8-mile mark on Miller Track. The road was there. Not Border Patrol Route 19. That was gone, erased, sealed away when I'd closed the fracture. But there was a road there now, a dirt track branching off to the east, leading into the desert. It hadn't been there before. I'd driven past this spot countless times since last April, and there had never been anything but empty scrubland. Now there was a road. I slowed down, my heart pounding. This couldn't be happening. I'd closed the fracture. I'd erased the timeline. Border Patrol Route 19 was gone. But this wasn't Border Patrol Route 19. This was something else. I grabbed my radio. Dispatch Unit 17. I'm on Miller Track 8 miles north of 118. I'm seeing a road here that's not on the maps. Can you confirm? Stand by, Unit 17. Karen's voice was calm, professional. I could hear her typing. I'm not showing any roads in that area. Are you sure about your location? I checked my GPS. The coordinates were exact. I was right where I thought I was. Positive. I'm looking at a dirt road heading east, not on any maps? Negative. Nothing in the database. I sat there for a long moment trying to decide what to do. Every instinct was telling me to drive past it, to ignore it, to not make the same mistake twice. But I was a cop. It was my job to investigate. And I needed to know if this was connected to what I'd done last April, if closing the fracture had somehow created a new problem. I turned onto the dirt road. The moment my tires left Miller Track, I knew something was wrong. The air pressure changed. The temperature dropped. And when I looked at my dashboard clock, I saw that it had stopped. Not at 11:47, like on Border Patrol Route 19. At 2:23 a.m., the exact time Claire had been born. I drove slowly down the dirt road, watching for any signs of what might be ahead. The desert looked normal. Scrub brush, rocks, the occasional mesquite tree. But the shadows were wrong again, falling at impossible angles. After about 2 miles, I saw a building in the distance. Not a border patrol station this time, but a house. A small ranch house with a porch and a pickup truck parked out front. As I got closer, I could see lights on inside, could see someone moving around through the windows. I pulled up to the house and killed my engine. Sat there for a minute, trying to decide if I should investigate or turn around and leave. The front door opened, and someone stepped out onto the porch. It was me. Not the older version from Border Patrol Route 19. Not a future me or a past me. Just me. Looking exactly the way I looked now. Wearing civilian clothes, holding a cup of coffee. He waved. Took you long enough. I've been waiting for you. I got out of my cruiser slowly, my hand near my service weapon. Who are you? I'm you, Mason, or rather, I'm the version of you who didn't close the fracture. The version who chose to stay on the loop instead of erasing everyone. I felt my stomach drop. That's not possible. There was only one choice. I made it. That timeline is gone. Is it? He took a sip of his coffee and leaned against the porch railing. When you close the fracture, you collapsed one timeline, but quantum mechanics suggests that every choice creates a branch. A new timeline where the opposite choice was made. You're saying there's a timeline where I didn't flip that switch? Not just one timeline, infinite timelines. In some, you closed the fracture. In others, you didn't. In some, you never found Border Patrol Route 19 in the first place. Every possible outcome exists somewhere. I climbed the porch steps and stood facing him, looking at my own face, my own body, seeing the same exhaustion and guilt I felt reflected back at me. "So, what happened to you?" I asked. "In your timeline?" I chose not to close the fracture, chose to complete the loop and go back to my life. And for a while, it was okay. I married Jennifer, we had Claire, everything was normal. For a while? The pull never stopped. The road kept calling me back. And eventually, 6 months after Claire was born, I got trapped permanently. I've been on the loop for 3 years now, driving the same roads, living the same moments over and over. He gestured to the house behind him. This is my loop, this moment. The last time I was truly happy, before I realized I'd never escape. Before I understood what I'd given up by trying to take the moral high ground. So you're telling me I made the right choice? That I should feel good about erasing all those people? I'm not telling you anything. I'm just showing you what the alternative looks like. You chose to close the fracture and live with the guilt. I chose to keep it open and live with the consequences. Neither of us is happy, Mason. Neither of us found a good solution. I looked at the house. Through the windows I could see more of him. Different versions, all living in their own loops, all trapped in moments they couldn't escape. Some were holding baby Claire. Some were kissing Jennifer. Some were just sitting alone, staring at nothing. How many of us are there? I asked. Too many to count. Every version that found Border Patrol Route 19 and made a choice. We're all here, all existing in our own loops, all living with the consequences of our decisions. And the ones who closed the fracture, the ones like me, they're not here, they escaped. They went back to their normal lives, but they carry the guilt forever. They remember what they did, and it eats at them in ways they can't explain to anyone. He finished his coffee and set the cup on the porch railing. You came here looking for answers, for some way to know if you made the right choice. But there is no right choice, Mason. There's just choices and consequences. You chose to save yourself and your family at the cost of everyone in that fractured timeline. I chose to save them at the cost of my own freedom. Which is better? I don't know. Ask me again in another 3 years, or 30 years, or 300 years. Time doesn't mean much when you're living in a loop. I wanted to argue with him, to find some flaw in his logic, some reason to believe that I'd made the objectively correct choice. But I couldn't, because he was right. There was no good answer, just different types of suffering. How do I get back? I asked. The same way you got here, just drive west. This loop isn't like Border Patrol Route 19. It doesn't trap you permanently, it just shows you what might have been, what could be if you'd made different choices. Why? What's the point of showing me this? He smiled, but there was no humor in it. Because you needed to see it, needed to understand that you're not a monster for the choice you made. You're just a man who was put in an impossible situation and did the best he could. Just like I did. Just like all the other versions of us scattered across infinite timelines. I turned to walk back to my cruiser, then stopped. The older me from Border Patrol Route 19, the one who'd been trapped for 15 years. He thanked me for ending his loop. Was he grateful, or did he resent me? Both. He was grateful to finally rest, but he resented that you got to live while he faded away. That's the nature of choice, Mason. Every decision has a cost, and someone always pays it. I got in my cruiser and started the engine. Through the windshield, I could see the other me standing on the porch, watching me leave. He raised his hand in a wave that looked like goodbye. I drove west, back toward Miller Track. The dirt road was exactly where it had been, and within minutes I was back on familiar ground. When I looked in my rearview mirror, the road was gone. Just empty desert again. My dashboard clock started working again. It showed 2:31 a.m. 8 minutes had passed since I'd turned onto that dirt road. 8 minutes to see an alternate version of my life and understand that there were no good choices, only different flavors of regret. I finished my shift without incident. Drove home as the sun was rising, painting the desert in shades of gold and orange. Jennifer was up, feeding Claire, looking tired but happy. "How was work?" she asked. "Quiet," I said. And this time it wasn't entirely a lie. I've thought a lot about that night, about the other me trapped in his loop, living the same happy moment over and over while understanding that it would never progress, never change. About whether that's better or worse than living free with the memory of what I'd done to earn that freedom. I don't have an answer. I'm not sure there is one. What I do know is this. Border Patrol Route 19 is gone. The fracture is closed. The timeline I erased no longer exists. But the choices I made that night in the basement of Station 19 will stay with me forever. Sometimes I dream about the Border Patrol agents I saw through that tear in reality. The one who waved goodbye. The others who faded away without ever knowing why their existence was ending. I wonder if they had families, if they had dreams, if they were happy. I wonder if, in some quantum sense, they're still out there, still existing in a probability wave that collapsed when I flipped that switch, still living their lives in some version of reality I can't access. I hope they are. I hope that closing the fracture didn't actually erase them, just separated our timelines completely. I hope they're out there somewhere, going about their days, never knowing how close they came to non-existence. But I don't know if that's true, and not knowing is its own kind of punishment. Claire is 6 months old now. She's starting to smile, to recognize faces, to reach for things that catch her attention. Jennifer and I are talking about buying a house, putting down roots, building a life for our family. It's good, it's normal, it's everything I wanted. And every time I hold my daughter, every time I see Jennifer smile, I think about the price I paid for this life. The people I erased, the versions of myself I ended, the choice I made in a basement that shouldn't have existed, on a road that's now gone from all maps and all memories except mine. Was it worth it? Most days, I think yes. I look at Claire's face and tell myself that her existence justifies everything I did, that saving my family was the right choice, no matter the cost. But some nights, when I'm lying awake at 3 a.m. when the guilt is strongest and the questions won't stop, I'm not so sure. I think about the other me, trapped in his loop, living the same moment forever. He made a different choice. He tried to take the moral high ground, and he's paying for it with his freedom. Which of us is better off? I don't know. And maybe that's the real answer. Maybe there is no better off. Maybe we're all just doing our best in impossible situations, making choices we hope we can live with, and carrying the consequences forever. I haven't been back to Miller Track in 3 months. I've been avoiding it, taking different routes, adding hours to my patrol time just to stay away from that 8-mile stretch where reality gets thin and roads appear that shouldn't exist. Sheriff Rollins hasn't said anything yet, but I know it's only a matter of time before he notices the pattern. Before he calls me into his office and asks why I'm avoiding a specific section of my patrol route. When that happens, I'll have to make another choice. Tell him the truth and risk sounding insane? Make up an excuse and hope he believes it? Or just accept whatever consequences come from refusing to patrol that area. I don't know what I'll choose, but I know that whatever I decide, I'll have to live with it. Just like I'm living with the choice I made in that basement. Just like all the versions of me scattered across infinite timelines are living with their choices. That's the thing about being human. About having free will. Every choice creates a branch. Every decision splits reality. And somewhere, in some timeline, some version of you is living with the consequences of choosing differently. I closed the fracture. I erased a timeline. I saved my family and myself. And I'll carry the weight of that choice for the rest of my life. That's my story. That's what happened when I found the patrol road that shouldn't exist. Believe it or don't, I don't care. I just hope you never find a road like that. Never have to make a choice like the one I made. Because once you've stood at that crossroads, once you've seen the branching timelines and understood the cost of every decision, you can never quite believe in simple answers again. You learn that every choice is a kind of murder. Every path taken means infinite paths not taken. Every life saved means other lives sacrificed. And you learn to live with that knowledge, carrying it like a stone in your chest, feeling its weight with every breath. That's what I learned on Border Patrol Route 19. That's what I learned in the basement of Station 19 when I flipped that switch. That's what I'm still learning every day as I watch my daughter grow and my wife smile, and my life unfold exactly the way I chose. The road is gone, the fracture is closed, the timeline is erased, but the choice remains, forever. And so do I. My name is Wyatt Dalton, and I've been a deputy with Terrell County Sheriff's Department for 19 years. 19 years of working the graveyard shift along one of the most remote stretches of the Texas-Mexico border. Out here, the night belongs to smugglers, coyotes, both the animal and human kind, and the few of us crazy enough to patrol these empty roads in the dark. I'm telling you this because something happened last year that I still can't explain. Something that makes me check my radio frequency 3 times before I start every shift. Something that wakes me up at 3 a.m. in a cold sweat, listening for a voice that shouldn't exist. It started on September 7th, 2021. A Tuesday night, warm even for early September, with the kind of humidity that makes your uniform stick to your skin within minutes of stepping outside. I'd just started my shift at 10 p.m., checking in with our dispatcher, Linda, before heading out to my patrol sector. Terrell County is one of the least populated counties in Texas, fewer than 900 people spread across 2,358 square miles. My sector covered the southern half, which meant I was responsible for roughly 1,200 square miles of desert, ranch land, and empty highway. On a typical night, I might see 2 or 3 vehicles total, sometimes none. It's lonely work, but I've always preferred it that way. Less drama, fewer politics. Just me and the road and the endless sky above. Around 11:15 p.m., I was heading south on Highway 349, about 40 miles from the border, when my radio crackled with static. Not unusual. We had dead zones all over the county where the signal got spotty. But then, through the static, I heard a voice. Unit 12, requesting immediate backup at the old Sanderson checkpoint. Multiple suspects, armed and dangerous. Repeat, Unit 12 requesting immediate backup. I grabbed my mic. Dispatch, this is Unit 18. Did you copy that transmission? Linda came back immediately. Negative, Unit 18. I didn't receive any transmission. What did you hear? Someone calling for backup at the Sanderson checkpoint. Said they were Unit 12. There was a pause. Unit 18, we don't have a Unit 12. Haven't had that designation in over 30 years. And the Sanderson checkpoint has been closed since 2003. I knew that. The old checkpoint had been a border patrol facility. Shut down when they consolidated operations and moved everything to newer facilities. The buildings were still there, abandoned and slowly being reclaimed by the desert, but nobody had used them in almost 20 years. Copy that, dispatch. Probably just interference from another agency. Could be. I'll make a note in the log. Let me know if you hear anything else. I continued south, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off about that transmission. The voice had sounded stressed, urgent, but also distant. Like it was coming from very far away, not just across the county, but across something else. Time, maybe, or space in a way I didn't understand. 20 minutes later, it happened again. Unit 12, requesting immediate backup at the old Sanderson checkpoint. Multiple suspects, armed and dangerous. Repeat, Unit 12 requesting immediate backup. The exact same words. The exact same inflection. Like someone had recorded it and was playing it back. I keyed my mic. Dispatch, I'm hearing that transmission again. Word for word exactly the same as before. Unit 18, I'm still not receiving anything on this end. What frequency are you monitoring? I checked my radio. Channel 3, same as always. Try switching to Channel 2, see if that clears it up. I switched channels. The transmission stopped. I stayed on Channel 2 for about 5 minutes, then switched back to Channel 3. Immediately, the voice came back. Unit 12, requesting immediate backup at the old Sanderson checkpoint. Multiple suspects, armed and dangerous. Repeat. Unit 12 requesting immediate backup. Same words, same timing, same everything. Dispatch, it's only happening on Channel 3, some kind of interference? Linda was quiet for a moment. That shouldn't be possible. Channel 3 is our primary frequency. It's encrypted and monitored by the state. Nobody else should be able to transmit on it. Well, someone is. I'm going to report this to the communications supervisor. In the meantime, you can operate on Channel 2 if the interference continues. But I didn't switch channels. Something about that voice was bothering me. The urgency was real. I'd been a cop long enough to recognize genuine distress, but the repetition was wrong. Nobody calls for backup using the exact same words and phrasing multiple times. You'd update your status, provide new information, get increasingly desperate or angry or scared. This voice just repeated, like a recording or a loop. Over the next hour, I heard the transmission 7 more times. Always the same words, always the same tone, always exactly 3 minutes and 42 seconds apart. I timed it. Between each transmission, there was exactly 3:42 of silence. Then the call would repeat. Not 3:41, not 3:43, exactly 3:42 every single time. Around 1 a.m., I made a decision. I was about 50 miles from the old Sanderson checkpoint. It would take me 30 minutes to get there, and I'd be way outside my normal patrol area. But I needed to know what was causing these transmissions. Dispatch, Unit 18. I'm going to check out the old checkpoint. See if there's any equipment out there that might be causing interference. Copy that, Unit 18. Be advised, you're going to be outside your sector. I'll notify Unit 9 to cover your area. 10-4. I headed east on Route 90, then south on a series of increasingly rough dirt roads that led to the abandoned checkpoint. The area had been remote even when the facility was operational. Now, with the buildings empty and the roads unmaintained, it felt like driving to the edge of the world. The transmission continued every 3:42. I started counting down in my head, predicting when the next one would come. Sure enough, right on schedule. Unit 12 requesting immediate backup at the old Sanderson checkpoint. Multiple suspects, armed and dangerous. Repeat, Unit 12 requesting immediate backup. As I got closer to the checkpoint, I expected the signal to get stronger, clearer. But it didn't. It stayed at the same volume, the same quality, like the source wasn't actually getting any nearer. At 1:47 a.m., I arrived at the old checkpoint. The facility consisted of 3 buildings: a main operations center, a vehicle inspection bay, and what had probably been a detention facility. All of them were in various stages of decay. Windows broken, doors hanging off hinges, desert plants growing up through cracks in the pavement. I pulled up to the main building and left my headlights on, illuminating the entrance. The place looked deserted, exactly as I'd expected. No vehicles, no signs of recent activity, no equipment that might be transmitting radio signals. I grabbed my flashlight and got out of the cruiser. The night air was still warm, but there was something about the silence that made me shiver. Out here, you usually heard coyotes, or insects, or the wind through the scrub brush. But this place was dead quiet, like sound itself had been swallowed up by the abandoned buildings. My radio crackled. Unit 12, requesting immediate backup at the old Sanderson checkpoint. Multiple suspects, armed and dangerous. Repeat, Unit 12 requesting immediate backup. The transmission was coming at the usual 3:42 intervals, but now that I was actually at the checkpoint, I could hear something else underneath the words. A sound like wind, or static, or breathing, something alive mixed in with the recording. I walked toward the main building, my flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. The door was ajar, hanging at an angle from one remaining hinge. I pushed it open and stepped inside. The interior was what you'd expect from a building that had been abandoned for almost 20 years. Dust everywhere. Debris on the floor, graffiti on the walls, old furniture overturned and broken. Nature slowly reclaiming what humans had built. But in the center of the main room, incongruous and impossible, was a radio base station. Not old equipment from 2003, but a modern unit, sitting on a desk that looked like it had been set up recently. The radio was on, lights blinking, and as I watched, it transmitted. Unit 12, requesting immediate backup at the old Sanderson checkpoint. Multiple suspects, armed and dangerous. Repeat, Unit 12 requesting immediate backup. The sound came from the radio's speaker, but also from my handheld unit clipped to my belt. Stereo transmission echoing in the empty room. I walked over to the desk. The radio was plugged into a portable generator that was humming softly in the corner. Someone had been here recently. Someone had set this up. I examined the radio unit. It was a standard law enforcement model, similar to what we used at the station, but the frequency display was wrong. It showed channel 3, our primary frequency, but the numbers beneath it were flickering, changing constantly like they couldn't quite lock onto a single setting. On the desk next to the radio was a logbook. I opened it. The first entry was dated September 1st, 2021, 6 days ago. The handwriting was shaky, barely legible. Day 1. Set up radio at checkpoint. Testing transmission range, need to make contact. Need them to know what happened here. Day 2. Transmission successful, repeating on 3:42 intervals. They need to understand. They need to send backup before it's too late. Day 3. Why isn't anyone responding? Can't they hear me? I'm calling for backup. There are too many of them, armed and dangerous. Need help now. Day 4. Still no response. The transmission is working. I can hear it on my receiver, but nobody comes. Nobody helps, just like before, just like the night it happened. Day 5. Tried changing the interval. Tried changing the message. Nothing works. They don't hear me. Or they hear me but don't believe me. I'm trapped here, trapped in this moment. Repeating the last thing I said before, the entry ended there. No day 6. No explanation of what before meant. I flipped through the rest of the logbook. The remaining pages were blank except for one entry at the very end, written in different handwriting. Neater, more controlled. If you're reading this, you need to destroy the radio. Don't listen to the transmissions. Don't try to respond. It's not a call for help. It's a loop, a trap. The more you listen, the more it pulls you in. Leave now. Forget you were here. Some calls shouldn't be answered. I looked up from the logbook. The radio was still transmitting, still sending out that call for backup every 3:42. But now I was close enough to hear something I'd missed before. Underneath the voice, underneath the static, there was another sound. Screaming. Faint, but definitely there. Multiple voices, overlapping, all of them calling for help in a desperate, eternal chorus. My hand moved toward the radio's power switch. I could end this right now. Turn it off, pack it up, report it to Linda, and let someone else figure out what was going on. But I hesitated, because the voice calling for backup, I recognized it now. I'd heard it before, years ago, during my training at the academy. It was the voice of Deputy Marcus Cole, a legend in Texas law enforcement. He'd worked Terrell County back in the 90s, known for his dedication, his courage, and his tragic death. Marcus Cole had died in '97 at the old Sanderson checkpoint. He'd been investigating a smuggling operation, called for backup, and been ambushed before help could arrive. They found his body 3 days later, along with evidence of a shootout. The smugglers were never caught. That was 24 years ago. And somehow, his last radio transmission was still playing. Still calling for help that would never come. Still trapped in the moment of his death, repeating forever on a frequency that shouldn't exist. I grabbed my radio. "Dispatch, Unit 18. I'm at the old checkpoint. I found the source of the interference. It's a radio unit. Appears to have been set up recently. But there's something wrong here. Something really wrong." Linda's voice came back, but it was distorted, breaking up. "Unit, say again, not, you clearly. Dispatch, do you copy? I'm at the checkpoint. I found static. Pure static. No voice underneath." I tried again. "Dispatch, this is Unit 18. Please respond." Nothing. Just static and that underlying sound of screaming. My watch showed 2:03 a.m. I'd been in the building for 16 minutes, but my patrol car's clock, visible through the broken window, showed 1:51 a.m. I'd lost 12 minutes somewhere, or gained them. Time wasn't working right here. I looked back at the radio. It was still transmitting Marcus Cole's voice, still calling for backup. But the interval had changed. It was no longer 3:42 between transmissions. Now it was 2:15, and getting shorter with each cycle. 2:15, 1:48, 1:21, 0:54. The transmissions were speeding up, compressing, like something was winding tighter and tighter, building toward some kind of breaking point. And underneath Marcus Cole's voice, I could now hear other voices, other officers. Other calls for help from other times, all of them layered on top of each other, all of them trapped in their final moments. I recognized some of them. Deputy Sarah Martinez, killed in 2003 during a traffic stop. Sheriff Tom Blackwell died of a heart attack while chasing suspects in 2010. Officer James Rivera, ambushed during a drug raid in 2015. All of them calling for help. All of them trapped in loops. All of them broadcasting on a frequency that connected their deaths across decades. The interval between transmissions was down to 30 seconds now. Then 20. Then 10. I reached for the power switch on the radio, but before I could touch it, all the transmissions merged into a single, sustained sound. Not words anymore. Just a chorus of screaming that seemed to come from the radio and from the walls and from the air itself. I stumbled backward, my hands over my ears, but it didn't help. The sound was inside my head, bypassing my ears entirely. I could feel it vibrating in my skull, in my chest, in my bones. And then, as suddenly as it had started, it stopped. Complete silence. I lowered my hands slowly. The radio was still on, still broadcasting, but the sound was gone. The display showed a stable frequency now, channel 3 exactly where it should be. I grabbed my handheld radio. "Dispatch, Unit 18, do you copy?" Linda's voice came back immediately, clear as day. "Unit 18, I copy. Where have you been? You've been off the air for almost 40 minutes. I was about to send someone to check on you." 40 minutes. I looked at my watch. It showed 2:06 a.m. I'd been in the building for 19 minutes. But according to Linda, I'd been out of contact for 40. "Dispatch, I'm at the old Sanderson checkpoint. I found a radio unit here that's been transmitting on our frequency. I need to report this as evidence. Copy that, Unit 18. Do you need assistance?" I looked around the abandoned building. The radio was still on, but it wasn't transmitting anymore. The generator in the corner was silent, and the logbook on the desk was gone. I walked over to where I'd seen it. The desk was covered in dust, undisturbed except for where I'd leaned against it. No logbook, no evidence that anyone had been here recently except me. "Unit 18, do you need assistance?" Linda repeated. "Negative, dispatch. I'm going to secure the scene and head back. I'll file a full report when I get in." "Copy that. Be safe out there." I walked out of the building and back to my patrol car. As I drove away from the checkpoint, I kept checking my rearview mirror, half expecting to see lights in the abandoned building or some sign that I hadn't imagined the whole thing. But there was nothing, just empty desert and the ruins of a facility that had been closed for almost 20 years. For the rest of my shift, my radio stayed quiet. No transmissions from Unit 12, no calls for backup, no sounds of officers trapped in their final moments, just normal radio traffic. Linda checking on me occasionally, the usual codes and calls that make up a quiet night in rural Texas law enforcement. But I couldn't forget what I'd heard. Couldn't forget that logbook with its warning. "It's not a call for help, it's a loop, a trap. The more you listen, the more it pulls you in." When I got home that morning, I sat in my truck for 20 minutes before going inside, trying to process what had happened. Trying to convince myself it had been exhaustion or stress or some kind of hallucination brought on by too many years of night shifts. But I knew better. I'd heard Marcus Cole's voice. I'd seen that logbook. I'd felt time slip and fold and break around that abandoned checkpoint. Something was broadcasting on our frequency. Something that shouldn't exist. Something that was calling for help from the past, trapped in a moment that never ended. And I'd listened. That was my first mistake. I didn't tell anyone about what happened at the checkpoint. How could I? What would I say? That I'd heard dead officers calling for help on a radio that shouldn't work. That I'd lost time in an abandoned building. That a logbook had appeared and disappeared like a ghost. They'd put me on psychological leave at best. Force me into early retirement at worst. So I kept it to myself. Filed a report about finding old radio equipment at the checkpoint and recommending the site be secured. Went about my regular shifts like nothing had happened. But I couldn't stop thinking about it. Every shift, I'd monitor Channel 3 listening for that transmission. For 3 weeks, there was nothing. Just normal radio traffic. But I kept waiting, kept anticipating that moment when Marcus Cole's voice would break through the static and call for backup that would never come. In late September, I started researching. Used my days off to dig through old case files, accident reports, anything I could find about law enforcement officers who'd died in Terrell County over the past 50 years. The list was longer than I expected. 12 officers killed in the line of duty since 1970. Dozens more who'd died of natural causes, accidents, or suicide. Each one had a file, a story, a final moment. I was looking for patterns, trying to understand why Marcus Cole's transmission had been the one looping, why his voice was the one trapped. But the more I researched, the less sense it made. Marcus Cole had been a good cop, decorated, respected, loved by his colleagues. His death in D7 had been investigated thoroughly. The smugglers he'd been pursuing were never caught, but there was no evidence of a cover-up or conspiracy. Just a deputy who'd been in the wrong place at the wrong time, who'd called for backup and died before it arrived. A tragedy, but not unusual. Not something that would create a temporal loop or a broadcasting anomaly or whatever the hell I'd experienced at that checkpoint. Unless his death itself wasn't the cause. Unless something else had happened at that checkpoint. Something that went beyond one man's tragic end. I expanded my research. Started looking into the checkpoint's history before it closed. Found maintenance records, incident reports, personnel files. Most of it was mundane. Routine inspections, minor repairs, the usual bureaucratic paperwork that accumulates in any government facility. But then I found something interesting. In 2002, a year before the checkpoint closed, there had been a series of strange incidents. Equipment malfunctions. Radio interference. Officers reporting feeling disoriented or losing time while working there. Nothing dramatic enough to warrant a full investigation, but enough that the facility supervisor had filed multiple complaints with the state. Those complaints had been dismissed as equipment failure or human error, and a year later, the checkpoint was shut down as part of a broader consolidation effort. But what if it hadn't been equipment failure? What if something had been wrong with the location itself? What if the checkpoint had been built on some kind of weak spot, some place where time and space didn't quite work the way they should? I was starting to sound crazy even to myself, but I couldn't let it go. On October 3rd, almost a month after my first visit to the checkpoint, I went back. I told myself I was just doing a follow-up inspection, making sure the site was secure, documenting the old equipment before it was removed. All legitimate reasons for a deputy to visit an abandoned facility. But the truth was, I needed to know if it would happen again. If I'd hear those transmissions. If time would slip and fold the way it had before. I arrived at the checkpoint around 11 p.m. The buildings looked exactly the same, decrepit, empty, slowly collapsing under the weight of neglect. I parked in the same spot I'd used last time and sat there for a moment listening to my radio. Normal traffic. Linda checking in with other units. Nothing unusual. I got out and walked toward the main building. As I approached, I felt it. That same wrongness I'd felt last time. The air was too still, too quiet. The silence was oppressive, like the desert itself was holding its breath. I pushed open the door and stepped inside. The radio base station was still there, still in the center of the room, still connected to the generator, exactly where I'd seen it a month ago. But that was impossible. I'd reported the equipment. The county should have sent someone to remove it. Unless my report had been lost or ignored or... The radio crackled to life. Unit 12, requesting immediate backup at the old Sanderson checkpoint. Multiple suspects armed and dangerous. Repeat, Unit 12 requesting immediate backup. Marcus Cole's voice. The same words, the same desperate urgency. But this time, there was something different. The voice was degraded, distorted, like an old recording that had been played too many times. Some of the words were stretched, others compressed. The timing was off. Unit, requesting, backup, checkpoint, armed, help. The transmission fragmented further. Individual words separated by static. And underneath it, I could hear those other voices again. The chorus of dead officers calling for help across decades. I walked over to the radio, The display was flickering wildly, showing dozens of different frequencies scrolling through channels so fast I couldn't track them. And the power cord wasn't plugged into the generator anymore. It was just hanging loose, touching nothing. The radio was broadcasting without power. "This isn't real," I said aloud. "This can't be real." As if in response, every light in the building came on. Not the overhead fluorescents, which hadn't worked in years, but emergency lights, exit signs, even the indicator lights on ancient equipment that should have been long dead. Everything blazed to life at once, turning the dark interior into a harsh, over-bright space where shadows couldn't exist. And in that light, I saw them. Figures, dozens of them, standing throughout the building. Not solid, more like after-images, outlines of people superimposed on the present. Some were wearing old-style law enforcement uniforms from the 70s or 80s. Others wore more modern gear. All of them were frozen in mid-action, like photographs brought to three-dimensional life. I recognized some of them from my research. Marcus Cole, standing near the door, one hand reaching for his service weapon. Sarah Martinez, crouched behind an overturned desk. Tom Blackwell, clutching his chest. James Rivera, raising his hands in a gesture of surrender or peace. All of them caught in their final moments. All of them replaying their deaths on an endless loop. And they were all looking at me. Not through me, not past me, directly at me, with eyes that recognized me, with expressions that pleaded for something I didn't understand. Help. The word didn't come from the radio. It came from all of them at once, a chorus of voices speaking in perfect unison. "Help us. Break the loop. End the transmission. Let us rest." I backed away, my hand on my service weapon even though I knew it would be useless against whatever these things were. I don't know how. I don't understand what's happening here. "The radio," they said. "Destroy the radio. Break the cycle. Free us." I looked at the radio base station. It was still broadcasting that fragmenting transmission, still scrolling through frequencies impossibly fast. The sound had become a cacophony. Voices overlapping, words blending, all of it building toward some kind of crescendo. I could destroy it, shoot it, smash it, tear it apart. That's what the warning in the logbook had said. You need to destroy the radio. But something held me back. Because destroying the radio wouldn't just end the transmissions. It would end whatever connection these officers had to the living world. It would cut them off completely, trap them forever in their loops with no way to call for help, no way to make contact. "If I destroy it," I said, "what happens to you?" The figures flickered. "We don't know. Maybe we rest. Maybe we fade. Maybe we just stop. But anything is better than this. Anything is better than dying forever, moment after moment, never moving forward, never moving back, just stuck." I walked toward the radio. The figures parted to let me pass. I could feel them as I moved through the building, not physically, but emotionally. Their desperation, their exhaustion, their desperate hope that I would free them. I reached the radio and put my hand on it. It was ice cold, despite having run continuously for who knows how long. The display had locked onto a single frequency now, Channel 3, our primary channel, and the transmission had clarified. But it wasn't Marcus Cole's voice anymore. It was mine. Unit 18, requesting immediate backup at the old Sanderson checkpoint. Multiple suspects armed and dangerous. Repeat, Unit 18 requesting immediate backup. My voice, my words, my call for help from a moment that hadn't happened yet. "No," I whispered. "No, this is wrong. I'm not trapped. I'm not in a loop." "Not yet," the chorus answered. "But you will be. If you don't break the cycle now, you'll become part of it. You'll join us. Your voice will be added to the transmission." You'll call for help forever, and no one will come. I looked around at the figures. At Marcus Cole and Sarah Martinez and all the others who died here or died somewhere else but somehow ended up connected to this place, to this moment, to this endless calling. When? I asked. When does it happen to me? When do I become like you? The figures flickered again, and for a moment, I could see through them to what lay beneath. Not empty building, but overlapping scenes. The checkpoint as it had been in 1987, as it had been in 2003, as it was now. All of them existing simultaneously. All of them real. All of them happening at once. Time doesn't work right here, they said. The loop exists outside normal causality. Past and future blur together. If you're here now, you've always been here. You'll always be here unless you break the cycle. My hand tightened on the radio. I could feel it vibrating under my palm, could feel the wrongness emanating from it like heat from a fire. This device wasn't just broadcasting signals, it was a focal point, a nexus where all these deaths intersected. Destroying it might free these officers, or it might trap them more completely, or it might do nothing at all except add my own death to the collection. I need to know, I said. If I destroy this, will you truly be free, or will you just vanish? The figures were silent for a long moment. Then one of them stepped forward. Marcus Cole, more solid than the others, his features clearer. I don't know, he said, and his voice was his own now, not part of the chorus. I've been calling for backup for 24 years, Deputy Dalton. 24 years of dying in this building, over and over, feeling the bullets hit, falling to the ground, bleeding out while I wait for help that never comes. I've lost count of how many times I've lived my last moments. He gestured to the other figures. We all have. Some of us have been here longer than me. Some are newer. But we're all stuck in the same place, broadcasting on the same frequency, calling for help from a world that can't hear us anymore. Why me? I asked. Why can I hear you when no one else can? Because you listened. Most people hear the transmission and dismiss it as interference, or they investigate once and never come back. But you came back, you wanted to understand, and that opened a connection, made you part of the loop. So, if I destroy the radio, I condemn myself. If I don't, I condemn all of you to keep suffering. Marcus shook his head. No, if you destroy the radio, you might save yourself, might break the connection before it's too late. But you'll leave us here, trapped forever. And the next person who comes, the next officer who hears the transmission and wants to help, they'll face the same choice you're facing now. Then what do I do? He smiled, but it was sad, resigned. That's not for me to tell you. I made my choice 24 years ago when I came to this checkpoint alone, when I called for backup and tried to be a hero. You have to make yours. The lights in the building began to flicker. The figures started to fade. And my radio, my handheld unit clipped to my belt, began broadcasting. Unit 18 requesting immediate backup at the old Sanderson checkpoint. Multiple suspects armed and dangerous. Repeat, Unit 18 requesting immediate backup. My voice, my call for help, already broadcasting, already trapped in the loop even though I was still standing here, still alive, still real. The transmission repeated, and with each repetition, I felt something pulling at me. Like invisible hooks in my chest, tugging me toward that base station radio, toward the nexus of all these deaths. I had seconds to decide. Destroy the radio or become part of it. Save myself or try to save the others. I made my choice. I drew my service weapon and fired 6 rounds into the radio base station. The shots were deafening in the enclosed space. The radio exploded in a shower of sparks and shattered plastic. The display went dark. The transmission cut off mid-word, and the figures vanished. Not gradually, not fading away, just gone, like someone had flipped a switch. The lights went out, plunging the building back into darkness. I stood there in the silence, my ears ringing from the gunshots, my gun still raised, breathing hard. My handheld radio crackled. Unit 18, we heard shots fired. What's your status? Linda's voice. Normal, present, real. I holstered my weapon with shaking hands. Unit 18, 10-4. I'm okay. Had to destroy some equipment. False alarm. Everything's under control. Copy that. Do you need backup? I almost laughed. Backup. That's what had started all of this. Officers calling for backup, dying while they waited, getting trapped in loops that repeated their final moments forever. Negative, dispatch, I'm heading back. Unit 18, 10-8. I walked out of the building and got into my patrol car. Started the engine. Drove away from the checkpoint without looking back. For 3 days, I convinced myself I'd done the right thing. I'd destroyed the radio. I'd broken the loop. I'd saved myself from becoming another voice in that endless transmission. But on the 4th night, during my regular patrol, my radio crackled with a familiar sound. Unit 18, requesting immediate backup at the old Sanderson checkpoint. Multiple suspects, armed and dangerous. Repeat. Unit 18 requesting immediate backup. My voice, still broadcasting, still calling for help. The radio hadn't been the source. It had just been a receiver, an amplifier. The real loop existed somewhere else, somewhere I couldn't reach with bullets or violence or any physical intervention. And I'd just condemned myself to join it. After I heard my own transmission for the first time, I didn't sleep for 3 days. I'd lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the silence and waiting for that voice, my voice, to break through somehow, to manifest in my house, in my head, in the air around me. It didn't. The transmission only came through on Channel 3 during my shifts when I was actually patrolling, like it was tied to the act of doing my job, of being a deputy in Terrell County. I could have requested a transfer, could have quit, could have walked away from law enforcement entirely and never worked another shift in my life. But that felt like cowardice. And more importantly, I didn't think it would matter. Whatever connection had been established between me and that loop, between my present and my future, it wasn't going to be broken by something as simple as changing jobs. So I kept working, kept patrolling, kept listening to my own voice call for backup every shift. At first, it followed the same pattern as Marcus Cole's transmission had, repeating every 342 exactly the same words each time. But over the following weeks it started to change. The interval shortened. 342 became 330, then 315, then 3 o'clock, and the transmission itself started to degrade. Words dropped out or got repeated. The background noise increased, static, wind, something that sounded like breathing or crying. Unit, backup, checkpoint, armed, help me, please, someone. By November, I was hearing it every 2 minutes. The words were barely intelligible, just fragments of my voice mixed with static and that underlying sound of distress. And I started losing time. It would happen during my shifts. I'd be driving my patrol route, everything normal, and then I'd blink and suddenly I was somewhere else, miles away from where I'd been. 20 minutes gone from my memory. Half an hour. Once, almost 2 hours. Linda noticed. Unit 18, you've been off the air. Everything okay? Yeah, just lost signal. I'm fine. But I wasn't fine. I was slipping. Falling into that loop, bit by bit, moment by moment. And I couldn't figure out how to stop it. I went back to the checkpoint. Not to destroy anything. I'd learned that lesson, but to understand. To see if I could find any clue about what was really causing this, how it worked, whether there was any way to escape it. The main building was exactly as I'd left it. The destroyed radio still sat on the desk, its shattered components spread across the floor. But now there were other things too. Personal items I didn't remember seeing before. A wallet with Marcus Cole's ID, Sarah Martinez's badge, Tom Blackwell's watch stopped at 10:47, James Rivera's wedding ring, and my own hat, the one I'd been wearing during my first visit to the checkpoint, the one I thought I'd lost somewhere else entirely. These were anchors, objects that tied each officer to this place, to this loop. Physical reminders of the moments we'd been here, the choices we'd made, the transmissions we'd become part of. I picked up my hat and turned it over in my hands. It felt normal, solid, real, but somehow it had crossed from my timeline into this place, this nexus of deaths and loops and trapped moments. How long before the rest of me followed? I left the checkpoint and drove aimlessly through my patrol sector, trying to think, trying to find some pattern or logic that would help me understand what I was dealing with. That's when I saw her. A woman standing on the side of Highway 349, about 40 miles from the checkpoint. She was wearing a dress that looked like it was from the 1970s, her hair styled in an outdated fashion. She was waving at me, flagging me down. I pulled over. Standard procedure. If someone's in distress on a rural highway, you stop and help. I got out of my cruiser. "Ma'am, are you okay? Do you need assistance?" She looked at me with eyes that were wrong somehow. Too bright. Too aware. Like she could see through me to something beneath. "You're one of them," she said. "One of the officers from the checkpoint. Ma'am, I need you to..." I was like you once, tried to help, listened to the transmissions, wanted to understand. She stepped closer. My husband was a deputy in Terrell County, died in 1979 at that checkpoint. I heard him calling for help on the radio for years afterward. Decades. I thought I was going insane. "Ma'am, I don't..." Then one day, I realized the truth. The transmissions aren't calls for help. They're echoes. Resonances. The checkpoint is built on a thin place where reality is weak, and when someone dies there, or gets too close to understanding what it really is, they become part of the resonance. They echo forever. I stared at her. "How do you know this?" "Because I've been studying it for 43 years. I've talked to families of every officer who died in connection with that place. I've researched the land, the history, what was there before the checkpoint was built, and I've learned that some places are like wounds in the world, places where the barrier between what is and what was and what will be gets damaged. What do I do? How do I stop it?" She smiled sadly. "You don't. Once you're part of the resonance, you're part of it forever. But you have a choice about what kind of echo you become. You can fight it, try to break free, and in the process make the resonance stronger. Add your desperate struggle to the chorus of voices calling for help. Or you can accept it. Stop resisting. Let yourself slip into the loop completely. And in that acceptance, maybe find some kind of peace. That's not a choice. That's surrender. Is it, or is it just recognizing that some battles can't be won?" She turned and started walking away down the highway, into the darkness beyond my headlights. "You'll figure it out, Deputy Dalton, one way or another. Everyone who gets caught in the resonance eventually does." I got back in my cruiser and sat there, trying to process what she'd said. Was she real? Or was she another echo, another manifestation of the checkpoint's wrongness? My radio crackled. "Unit, help, Trapped. Can't. Someone please. My voice fragmenting further. Barely recognizable now. And the interval had shortened to 90 seconds. I checked my watch. 2:47 a.m. But the clock on my dashboard showed 11:15 p.m. 3.5 hours of discrepancy. Time was breaking down around me, fragmenting the same way my transmission was fragmenting. I drove back toward town, but the roads weren't right. Turns I knew by heart led to unfamiliar places. Highway markers showed numbers that didn't exist, and my GPS couldn't get a signal, the screen showing only static and error messages. I was lost in my own patrol sector. In a county I'd worked for 19 years. Lost because reality itself was coming apart at the seams. Finally, after what felt like hours but might have been minutes, I found myself back at the checkpoint. I didn't remember driving there, didn't remember making the decision to return. But here I was, parked in front of the main building again, the ruins illuminated by my headlights. I got out and walked inside. The personal items were still there, the badges, the watches, the rings. But now there was more. A photo of Marcus Cole with his family, Sarah Martinez's duty log, Tom Blackwell's glasses, and a photograph of me. Not one I recognized, but definitely me, standing in this exact building, looking directly at the camera, my expression somewhere between fear and resignation. I didn't remember anyone taking that photo, didn't remember posing for it. But there it was. Proof that I'd been here before, or would be here again, or was here right now in some timeline that overlapped with this moment. The radio, the destroyed radio I'd shot weeks ago, was working again, whole and undamaged, sitting on the desk, broadcasting. But it wasn't broadcasting my transmission anymore. It was broadcasting silence. Not empty airwaves. Not static. But a specific heavy silence. The kind of silence that exists in the moment after a death. After the last breath. After the final heartbeat. The silence of ending. I walked over to the radio and put my hand on it. It was warm now, alive with some kind of energy. And when I touched it, I could feel them. All the officers who'd died here, who'd been trapped in their loops, who'd been calling for help across decades. They weren't calling anymore. They were waiting. Waiting for me to make my final choice. Fight or accept. Struggle or surrender. Become another desperate voice in the chorus. Or become something else. Something quieter. Something that had stopped resisting. I stood there for a long time, my hand on that radio, feeling the weight of all those deaths pressing down on me, feeling the pull of the loop, the gravity of that resonance trying to drag me down into it completely. And I realized something. The woman on the highway had been wrong. There wasn't just two choices. There was a third option. Not fighting, not surrendering. Understanding. I sat down at the desk with the radio and started examining it properly for the first time. Not as something to destroy or fear, but as a tool. A device that was doing something impossible, and maybe if I understood how it worked, I could understand how to use it differently. The radio was broadcasting on Channel 3, our primary frequency. But when I looked at the internal settings, I could see that it was actually transmitting on dozens of frequencies simultaneously. Hundreds, maybe. All of them overlapping. All of them creating interference patterns that shouldn't be possible with standard radio technology. It wasn't just a radio. It was some kind of resonance amplifier. It was taking something that existed naturally, the echoes of deaths, the weak spots in time, and broadcasting them, making them louder, making them impossible to ignore. But what if the amplification could work in reverse? What if instead of making the echoes louder, I could use the radio to dampen them, to quiet the resonance rather than amplify it? I started adjusting the settings. Not randomly, but carefully, watching how each change affected the broadcast, the frequency range, the power output, the modulation. As I worked, I became aware of presences in the room. The figures were back: Marcus Cole, Sarah Martinez, all the others. But they weren't as clear as before. They were fading, becoming more transparent with each adjustment I made to the radio. "What are you doing?" Marcus asked. His voice was distant, like he was speaking from very far away. "I'm not sure," I admitted. "I'm trying to find the frequency where the loop breaks, where the resonance stops amplifying and starts canceling itself out. That's not how it works. The loop is fundamental. It's built into the nature of this place. Maybe. But every resonance has a frequency where it dampens, where the waves interfere destructively instead of constructively. If I can find that frequency." I continued adjusting. The figures grew fainter, and my own transmission, the one that had been repeating every 90 seconds, started to change. "Unit 18, backup, checkpoint." The words were coming less frequently now. 2 minutes between transmissions, then 3, then 5. "You're not destroying us," Sarah said. What are you doing?" "I'm lowering the volume," I said, "making it so the echoes are still there but quieter. So they don't trap people, so they don't pull in new officers and add them to the loop." "Will we still exist?" "I think so. But you won't be calling for help anymore. You'll just be memories, whispers, the kind of thing people might hear in the wind or in the static, but not something that traps them." The figures looked at each other. I couldn't read their expressions anymore. They were too faded, too far from reality. But I sensed something like relief. "That's acceptable," Marcus said finally. "Better than ending. Better than continuing to scream forever." I kept adjusting. Found the frequency where the transmission dropped to once every 30 minutes, then once an hour, then once a day. And finally, I found the frequency where it stopped entirely. The radio went silent. The figures vanished. And the weight that had been pressing down on the checkpoint, the wrongness that had permeated this place, lifted like morning fog burning off in sunlight. I sat back and looked at the radio. It was still on, still broadcasting. But it was broadcasting on a frequency that human ears couldn't hear, that standard radio equipment couldn't detect. The resonance was still there, but it was subsonic now, below the threshold where it could trap people. My watch and the dashboard clock showed the same time now. 4:23 a.m. Time had synchronized. The fracture had healed, or at least reduced to the point where it was no longer noticeable. I stood up and walked out of the building. The desert looked normal. The silence was the regular silence of the night, not that oppressive wrongness I'd felt before. I got in my cruiser and drove back to town. My radio stayed quiet the entire way. No transmissions, no voices, no calls for help from officers who'd died decades ago. When my shift ended at 6 a.m., I wrote a report recommending that the old Sanderson checkpoint be demolished. Not because it was dangerous in any obvious way, but because the buildings were unstable, attracting trespassers, and serving no useful purpose. The county approved the demolition 3 months later. I watched from a distance as the bulldozers knocked down the main building, crushing the desk and the radio and all those personal items beneath tons of rubble. It felt like a funeral, like I was finally letting those officers rest. For a few weeks after the demolition, I still heard transmissions occasionally. Brief, fragmentary things, a word here, a phrase there. But they grew less frequent, quieter, until finally they stopped altogether. The checkpoint was gone. The loop was broken. And I was free, but I wasn't the same deputy who'd first heard Marcus Cole's voice calling for backup on a September night. I couldn't be. I'd seen too much, understood too much about the way reality could break and fold and create traps for the unwary. I started keeping a log. Not officially, just a personal document where I recorded strange calls, unexplained transmissions, anytime the radio did something that didn't quite make sense. Because I knew now that the checkpoint hadn't been unique. It had just been one weak spot among many, one place where the barriers were thin and echoes could get trapped. There would be others. In December 2021, I heard a transmission from a deputy who'd been killed in a traffic accident in 2008. His voice, calling in a vehicle pursuit that had ended in his death. The transmission repeated 3 times over a 2-hour period, then stopped. I traced it to an intersection where he'd crashed. Went there at the same time of night when I'd heard the transmission. Found nothing unusual, but I stood there for a while anyway, acknowledging his death, his service, his sacrifice, and I never heard that transmission again. In January 2022, a new officer joined our department. Young, eager, fresh out of the academy. On his second shift, he came to me with a confused expression. "Deputy Dalton, I keep hearing weird things on Channel 3, voices that don't make sense. Dispatch says they don't hear anything, but I swear, I know, I said. I hear them too sometimes. Radio interference, atmospheric conditions. It's normal in rural areas like this. Are you sure? Because it sounds like someone calling for help." I looked at him for a long moment. Saw the same curiosity I'd felt, the same desire to help, the same impulse to investigate that had led me to the checkpoint. And I made a decision. "Listen to me carefully," I said. "Sometimes, on quiet nights, you'll hear things on the radio that don't make sense. Calls that don't get logged. Voices asking for help. Your instinct will be to investigate, to figure out what's going on, to help whoever's calling. Isn't that our job? Yes, but some calls shouldn't be answered. Some people are beyond our help, no matter how much we want to help them. If you hear a transmission that seems off, wrong time, wrong location, wrong frequency, you log it, you note it, but you don't chase it. You understand?" He looked uncertain. "That doesn't seem right. Ignoring calls for help. I'm not saying ignore them. I'm saying recognize when a call is coming from somewhere you can't reach, somewhere outside your jurisdiction, outside your time, outside the reality where you can actually help." "I don't understand." "You will," I said, "eventually. Just promise me that if you hear something strange, something that makes you want to investigate an abandoned place or follow a voice into the darkness, you'll talk to me first. Before you do anything, promise me that." He promised. I don't know if he'll keep that promise when the time comes. I don't know if anyone really can. The impulse to help is strong in people who become cops. It's why we take the job in the first place. But maybe if I can catch the next one early enough, I can show them how to dampen the resonance instead of amplifying it. How to quiet the echoes instead of adding their own voice to the chorus. It's been almost a year since I first heard Marcus Cole's transmission. A year since I found that checkpoint and realized that reality was thinner than I'd ever imagined. That death could create echoes that lasted decades. That trying to help could trap you in the very thing you were trying to escape. I still work the night shift. Still patrol the empty roads of Terrell County. Still monitor Channel 3, listening for those transmissions that shouldn't exist. But I'm not afraid anymore. Because I understand now. The voices aren't trying to trap people. They're not malicious or evil. They're just echoes, resonances, the afterimage of moments that were so intense, so desperate, so filled with the human need for help that they left permanent impressions on reality itself. Like footprints in wet concrete that hardened before anyone could smooth them out. My job now is to find those footprints and smooth them out before someone else trips over them. to quiet the resonances before they can trap new officers in new loops. It's lonely work. I can't tell anyone what I'm really doing or why. Can't explain that I'm not just patrolling for smugglers and criminals, but for temporal anomalies and broadcasting echoes. But it matters. Every transmission I trace, every resonance I dampen, every echo I quiet, that's one less trap waiting to catch an unwary officer. One less voice that will call for help across decades. One less loop that will repeat forever. Last night, I heard a new transmission. Different voice, different location, different year. An officer calling for backup during a domestic disturbance in 1991. His voice was faint, barely audible under the static. But it was there, repeating every 4 minutes, trapped in a loop that had been running for 30 years. I'm going to find it. I'm going to trace it to its source. And I'm going to find the frequency where it dampens, where it quiets, where it becomes a whisper instead of a scream. Because that's what I do now. That's what I've become. Not just a deputy. Not just someone who patrols empty roads and enforces laws, but someone who understands that reality is thinner than we think. That death leaves echoes, that some calls for help come from places and times we can never reach, and someone who knows how to make sure those calls don't trap anyone else. That's my story. That's what happened when I heard that last radio transmission. Believe it or don't, I don't care anymore. I just hope that if you're ever working a night shift, patrolling empty roads, listening to your radio in the silence, and if you hear a voice calling for help that shouldn't be there, from a time that's already passed, from someone who's already gone, you'll remember what I learned. Some calls shouldn't be answered. Some echoes should be quieted. And some frequencies exist not to amplify sound, but to dampen it. To turn screams into whispers, to let the dead finally rest. That's the frequency I'm looking for. Every night, every shift. The frequency where the loop breaks. The frequency where the echoes fade. The frequency where the last radio transmission finally goes silent. And I'll keep looking until I find it. Or until I become one of the echoes myself. Either way, someone will hear my voice calling for help someday. Repeating on a frequency that shouldn't exist. Trapped in a loop that spans decades. And I truly hope, that whoever hears it will know what to do. Will know how to find the frequency where it quiets. Will know how to let me rest. Until then, I'll keep working, keep listening, keep dampening the resonances one by one. Because out here, in the darkness between radio signals, in the silence between transmissions, in the empty spaces of the night, that's where the echoes live. That's where the dead keep calling. That's where reality is thinnest and the barriers are weakest and the past bleeds through into the present. And someone has to stand guard, someone has to listen, someone has to know how to make the voices stop. That someone is me.